Chapter 972. Legislation. Looking at Ning Qianqing sitting opposite him, Li Tianlan's tone was a little stunned. We've discussed it internally. Everyone has always thought that it's time. As if he had been prepared, Ning Qianqing took out a thick stack of documents from his bag and handed them to Li Tianlan. Take a look at these. If you have no objections, I will personally go to Yuzhou to communicate with Guo Wentian. Li Tianlan silently looked at the documents in Ning Qianqing's hand, and then at his own palm. He held a spicy duck head in his palm. Without disposable gloves, his fingers were all stained with oil. He was silent for a while before asking in confusion, "What are you doing here today?" "Drinking." Ning Qianqing answered matter-of-factly. There were 7 or 8 exquisite side dishes in front of them, and a bottle of Maotai had been half empty. The scene in front of them was definitely not a report. When the two brothers were chatting, they talked about the future direction of Tiannan. On a whim, Ning Qianqing directly took out the documents that were strictly speaking not fully prepared from his bag. "Now that we've talked about it, you should also take a look. This is one of the most important tasks in Xianyuan City in the next 3 years. Li Tianlan got rid of the duck head in his hand, wiped his hands, took the documents and glanced at them. The dense small words on the documents made him dizzy, as if he had drunk too much. He shook his head and put the documents aside. "How many people are there in Xianyuan City now? Is it necessary to make laws at this time? I originally planned to wait until after the election, when everything would be settled and there would be more room for maneuver. But now it seems that we can do it a little earlier. The battle in North Sea is a key. After the battle, we can use your influence to promote the legislation in Xianyuan City." Ning Qianqing took a sip of wine and clicked his tongue. How can it be so easy to make laws? Councillor Guo Wentian of the National Assembly is one of the leaders of the Prince Group. It's not easy to get through him. This matter must have the support of the Assembly, at least the majority support. Xianyuan City needs our own laws. It seems easy to make laws, but the difficult part is to continuously revise and improve the laws after they appear. With repeated improvements, the legal system in Tiannan can slowly mature. This requires a process. Now it seems that there was indeed no need for Xianyuan City to pass laws in a hurry, but they had to prepare for a rainy day. By the time Xianyuan City and even the entire Tiannan City needs laws, our laws will be relatively mature. Otherwise, if we rush to legislate at that time, Tiannan will be in chaos for a period of time, and the development of the entire Emperor Dong's palace will be slowed down. Li Tianlan thought for a moment and looked at the information beside him. "Which step are you ready to take now?" "The city hall has reached a consensus. In addition, we've greeted some people in Zhongzhou State. We've sent invitations to the top judges, lawyers, scholars, and professors in Zhongzhou State, and the feedback is good. If Emperor Dong's palace can support it, the city hall will set up a team in a short time. Qiuming will be in charge of the specific work, and I'll be in charge of the external affairs." From the very beginning, the system of Xianyuan City was essentially different from that of Zhongzhou State. There was no Speaker of Parliament here. The one with the highest power was the mayor. Below the mayor were the chief executive officer and the chief judge. The current chief judge of Xianyuan City, Lan Qiuming, was the person he personally asked for from the Zhongzhou State Police Department a year ago, and it was Zhou Yuanshan who strongly recommended him. It was Lan Qiuming's proposal that Xianyuan City prepared to legislate a few years earlier. Li Tianlan was silent for a moment. He picked up the information beside him and looked at it. He nodded and said, "It's ready. Let me know if there's anything I need to do." "Actually, there is." Ning Qianqing laughed. "I'll go to Yuzhou to set up a team and communicate with Guo Wentian. But I hope you can bring up the matter of Xianyuan City's legislation in the parliament. This matter must be high profile." "No problem." Li Tianlan nodded carelessly. "Well, there's one more thing." Ning Qianqing reached for the bag beside him again. Li Tianlan felt a headache and waved his hand. "Just say it. I'm listening." He was very resistant to the information, especially the information of tens of millions of words. It was so dense that it made him dizzy no matter what. Ning Qianqing took out a pack of cigarettes from his bag and handed one to Li Tianlan. He threw the empty cigarette pack on the table into the trash can. You also have to think of a way to deal with the Ministry of Education. The construction of Xianyuan City is progressing well. Although many places are just empty frames, the construction plan has been approved by the City Hall. We have enough funds. There will be more and more construction teams all over the country, which means the construction speed will be faster and faster. By about August next year, the transformation of the entire city should be preliminarily completed. As for the old city, I plan to set up a campus including elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and universities. So we need a lot of talents in education. It's not going very well at present. I mean, the first university in Tiannan may not be the most famous key university in Zhongzhou State in the short term, but it must have a few top-level majors. Only in this way can we attract some talents and fresh blood. In the next few years, the focus of Xianyuan City will be on the two fields of legislation and education. In the Ministry of Education, the academics have a great influence. I guess you'll need to talk to Hua Xingyang this time, or directly communicate with the president. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded, raised his glass and clinked it with Ning Qiancheng. From nothing to something. Li Tianlan drank up the wine in his glass and looked at Ning Qiancheng with a smile. You've worked hard these 2 years. Not really. Ning Qiancheng shook his head. There was a look on his face that Li Tianlan had almost never seen before. He was high-spirited and even full of lofty sentiments. It was a kind of restrained but extremely dazzling confidence, just like how Li Tianlan talked about martial arts. I like this kind of life. His smile was very calm. To change a city, to change a province in the future, and even to change a country in the future. To change the fate of countless people. Compared to martial arts, I prefer who I am now. From nothing to something, Tianlan. You don't know how great a sense of accomplishment I feel watching Xianyuan City change day by day. Our future is in our hands. He poured a glass of wine and raised it. Cheers for the future. His cell phone rang. Li Tianlan drank up the wine in the glass, took out his phone and looked at the number. A smile appeared on his lips. He answered the phone and said, I have nothing to do. I'm drinking with Qiancheng. His voice was low and soft. Where are you? On the other end of the phone, Qin Weibai's voice came with a smile. I've arrived in Yuzhou. I'm going to Nanyuan right away. Tianlan, can you pick me up later? He was known as the Rubber King of Malaya and had different degrees of cooperation with the world's major consortiums. At the same time, he also ran more than 100 large-scale gambling in different countries in Asia. In addition, the signature project of Lin Chonglu's family was the fantasy project that Qin Weibai had mentioned. Strictly speaking, fantasy was a kind of drug, but it was an extremely high-grade drug. Fantasy also contained a certain amount of opium, but it used hundreds of different drugs to offset the harm of opium to the human body. Fantasy could be made into cigarettes or the most primitive powder, which was high in purity and extremely difficult to imitate. It could be said to be the gospel for drug addicts. The cost of fantasy was about twice that of regular drugs, but the price was 10 times that of ordinary drugs. Although Lin Chonglu had been strictly keeping the formula of fantasy a secret, he never refused to cooperate, and he was not stingy when distributing profits. Therefore, with fantasy alone, he had very close cooperation and good personal relations with the big drug lords all over the world. The Golden Triangle, the Silver Country, and Colombia could almost be regarded as his sphere of influence. Lin Chonglu's family alone could eat more than 30% of the output of the major plantations every year. This time, Qin Weibai personally talked to Lin Chonglu, which basically meant that Emperor Dong's palace had won the agency of fantasy project in Asia. The profits were still secondary. Emperor Dong's palace could mainly take advantage of this to reach out to the big drug lords and further stabilize its position in the dark world. This was what Qin Weibai valued most. Horsewoman looked down at her watch and whispered, "Boss, it's time to go. The plane will take off in 40 minutes. Qin Weibai seemed to be thinking about something. Hearing this, she frowned and subconsciously glanced at the time in front of her. Wait a little longer. Horsewoman subconsciously wanted to ask who Qin Weibai was waiting for, but before she could speak, the door of the private lounge was gently knocked on. Open the door. Qin Weibai's tone was calm. Horsewoman walked over and opened the door. A tall and burly bald man stood at the door. The aura all over his body was extremely fierce, and he seemed to be filled with an extremely violent power from head to toe. But the look in his eyes was extremely deep. Horsewoman frowned and suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Rather than saying that the other party's eyes were deep, it would be better to say that they were dull and lifeless, like a puppet. Her eyes slowly contracted, and her voice was cold. Ghost Flame. She recognized the man. The man was not a nobody in Zhongzhou State, or even in the Dark World. Even if the Dark World now had the power beyond the peak of the Invincible Realm, it was impossible for the peak of the Thundershocking Realm to be a nobody. Ghost Flame of Kunlun City. He was one of the few experts at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm in Kunlun City, and he was close to the half-step Invincible Realm. The peak of the realm. In everyone's heart, in Gu Xingyun's and even in Ghost Flame's own heart, he was the most loyal dog to Gu Xingyun. He was loyal and absolutely loyal. Why was he here? What did he want to do? Let him in. Qin Weibai's calm voice sounded behind Horsewoman. Horsewoman took a deep breath, turned sideways little by little, and then walked quickly to Qin Weibai, staring at Ghost Flame's every move. If it was the master of Samsara Palace, she didn't need to worry about anything at all. But Qin Weibai, who was beside her at this time, really didn't know martial arts. In terms of strength, Horsewoman didn't think she had much advantage over Ghost Flame. In this case, she couldn't help but be nervous. Ghost Flame's movements were a little stiff as he reached into his arms. Horsewoman's body instantly tightened. Ghost Flame's palms slowly reached out from his arms. He held a neatly folded envelope in his hand. Mrs. Letter. Ghostfire enunciated each word clearly. His voice sounded extremely strained, and his entire person looked incomparably strange. It was an indescribable stiffness. He was muddle-headed and ignorant, as if he were sleepwalking. This state. Horsewoman suddenly opened her eyes wide. She was familiar with this state, but also strange. She had never experienced it, but she had seen several people in this state. Hypnosis. There was no doubt that Ghostfire had been hypnotized in an extremely thorough way. Under such circumstances, he was completely a puppet of the hypnotized person. Everything he had seen and experienced, whether it was normal or abnormal, was normal in his mind at that moment. A hypnotized expert at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm? Horsewoman felt a little incredible. Qin Weibai reached out to take the envelope in Ghost Flame's hand and opened it. On the neat letter paper, there were countless names densely written in childish handwriting. They were all names. There was no introduction, only names. But for Qin Weibai, this was indeed the most critical information. She held the letter paper, lowered her head, and was silent for a long time. Ghost Flame, who looked a little stiff, left the lounge without saying a word. The door was slowly closed. Qin Weibai sighed softly. After a long time she murmured, "What a terrible child." Chapter 974. At nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon, in an old county in the jurisdiction of Southwest City, Chen Fangqing, who was a little tired, sat on a chair with a blank face and slowly drank a mouthful of warm water. The winter night was long, and dusk gradually enveloped the sky. The cold wind blew in from the open door of the main hall. It was cold, and the old but still spacious yard looked very cold. After the funeral it was dead silent. Chen Fangqing was sitting facing the door, and his expression was a little dull. Behind him was an empty ice coffin, and the room was filled with the smell of burning paper money. He sat motionless on the chair, looking a little gloomy. Today was the day of the burial of his daughter, Chen Lijuan. Chen Fangqing returned to his hometown in a low-key manner. The funeral didn't last more than half, which looked extremely simple. In the parliament, Guo Wentian, who was also a banner figure of the prince group like Chen Fangqing, attended the funeral. In addition, a secretary general and deputy mayor of Southwest City were also present, and then some relatives who were neither far nor close. Chen Fangqing lowered his head, and his eyes were a little sinister, but more self-deprecating. As the prime minister of Zhongzhou State, the funeral had been simple to the point of being a little shabby. It also seemed to prove his status in the prince group. If it was in the period when his influence was at its strongest, Even if he repeatedly stated that the funeral should be simple and refused other officials to attend, there would definitely be a lot of people who would really attend. Even if those officials knew that they would be criticized by him after coming, they would still come. The most obvious example was when Guo Wentian's old mother died the year before last. Guo Wentian also had a simple funeral, but the scene of the funeral was extremely grand. Guo Wentian's hometown was in an ordinary city in Tianfu province. On the day of the funeral, 6 directors of Tianfu province were present, including the speaker of Tianfu and the governor. In addition, the speaker of Southwest City, which was nearby, was also present in person. All the city leaders were present. Although Guo Wentian severely criticized those people afterward, no one was unhappy, whether they were criticized or criticized. Now, Chen Fangqing's funeral was also simple. Then it really became simple. This alone was enough to show that Chen Fangqing's status in the prince group had reached a precarious point. The Haoyue group scandal was constantly being exposed every day. From Nanyue province to Tianfu province, it had now become a serious case that swept across 4 to 5 provinces, involving property, entertainment, securities, insurance, and many other industries. The countless dark sides were shocking. This also represented incredible interests. Even Chen Fangqing did not expect that his nephew would do so many outrageous things in terms of accumulating wealth. The stock price of Haoyue Group had been fluctuating violently. In a short period of time, hundreds of cadres in several provinces had been arrested. The Ministry of Supervision of Zhongzhou State personally took action and handled the case swiftly and decisively. But Chen Fangqing knew very well that although everything seemed to be extremely bad, the Ministry of Supervision had not really taken action yet. They were still collecting more evidence. Before the election, the Southeast Group, which had been holding back for more than 2 years, obviously wanted to make a big news. Faced with such a favorable environment, the other party obviously did not intend to make a move easily. Several large state-owned groups controlled by Chen Lijuan were also found to have countless problems. There were also clues that the treason case of the Special Warfare Group had something to do with Chen Fangqing. Such a connection might not be too serious, but at such a critical moment, if such news was confirmed, it was bound to cause another huge storm. The situation was precarious and precarious. Chen Fangqing's but was like an active volcano that would erupt violently at any time, and he might be blown to pieces every minute and every second. In this case, countless people in the Prince Group were quietly distancing themselves from Chen Fangqing, including 2 provincial chairmen he had personally promoted. Chen Fangqing remained silent. He could only be silent, waiting for the opportunity to fight back in silence. Such an opportunity was getting closer and closer, and his situation was becoming more and more dangerous. In the gradually darkening sky, Chen Fangqing gritted his teeth and stood up with a glass of water. The cold wind blew through the room. Guo Wentian, with a white flower on his chest, walked into the yard from the gate. Looking at Chen Fangqing walking out of the main hall, he sighed. "It's time to go back," Guo Wentian said slowly. "The comrades in the southwest have already prepared the plane. There may be a meeting tonight, so we have to prepare early." He took out a cigarette and handed it to Chen Fangqing. Then he lit one and took a deep breath. Chen Fangqing nodded silently. Today was destined to be a very special day. It was not his daughter's funeral, but for the dark world, today was a very special day. 3 days ago, Li Tianlan received a letter of challenge from a mysterious expert in Emperor Dong's palace. And the time of the challenge was today. 2 super experts who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. And it was very likely that they were in the dark world. They were the super experts who were in the best state. Everyone was paying attention to this battle, including the parliament of Zhongzhou State. At this moment, there were less than 4 hours before the battle. Different results of this battle meant different situations. Not to mention the mentality of the parties, countless people in the dark world had begun to get nervous. "Is there any movement in Xianyuan City?" Chen Fangqing asked. "There's no big movement." Guo Wentian shook his head. "The representatives sent by all the superpowers have entered the headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace, and Xianyuan City has strengthened its guard. It's normal." On the second day after the letter of challenge was issued, All the forces in the dark world had contacted Emperor Dong's palace. Emperor Dong's palace did not refuse the requests of the superpowers, and allowed any force to come to Emperor Dong's palace to watch the peak battle of the dark world in person at the specified time. It seemed like they were showing off their strength, but it also seemed like they were extremely confident. Every move of Emperor Dong's palace in the past 3 days was full of confidence. From top to bottom, no one seemed to think that Li Tianlan might lose. What do you think of the result of this battle? Guo Wentian suddenly asked. Chen Fangqing turned his head and glanced at him silently. This result is important to us, but it's more important to you. Guo Wentian's tone was extremely calm. Chen Fangqing suddenly laughed. I don't know, he said blandly. But this may be my only chance. The result of this battle is hard to say. Li Tianlan may win, but I won't lose. Li Tianlan might win the battle, but the winner of the final battle in Beihai could only be him and the Prince Group. In Chen Fangqing's communication with His Majesty and Li Guangtu in advance, as long as Li Tianlan appeared in Beihai, the possibility of him dying was more than 80%. So the result of tonight's battle was not important. The final battle in Beihai that would start at the same time as this battle was the most important. Guo Wentian looked at his smiling face and was silent for a moment. Then he said in a hoarse voice, Recently, our work has been very passive, and the voices within the group are a little chaotic. I have discussed it with some comrades. He raised his head and looked at Chen Fangqing's eyes that suddenly became sharp. He said blandly, Old Chen, if the result of this final battle in Beihai is not satisfactory, then you should temporarily stay behind the scenes and recuperate. Chapter 975. Chen Fangqing did not speak. He quietly looked at Guo Wentian in front of him, and kept silent for a long time. He and Guo Wentian had known each other for more than 30 years. The two had already known each other when they first emerged in the Prince Group, but for many years, the relationship between them had not been harmonious. They were promoted to the level of deputy governor together, and then to the position of provincial governor together. Finally, they became the provincial speaker almost at the same time, and then were elected as members of parliament of Zhongzhou State. 5 years as a member of parliament. During that period, the relationship between Chen Fangqing and Guo Wentian was at its worst. They could almost be said to be incompatible with each other, even to the point of life and death. Because at that time in the Prince Group, there was a person named Zhou Tong. At that time, he was a member of parliament of Zhongzhou State and the speaker of Tianfu Province. At that time, Zhou Tong was the recognized leader of the Prince Group, and the most likely powerful figure to become the new president of Zhongzhou State. In the process of competing with Li Huaxing, Zhou Tong could be said to be in the lead all the way. Everyone thought that Zhou Tong would be elected without any suspense. At that time, the Prince Group was very strong, but it was far from being able to cover the sky with one hand. In order to push Zhou Tong up, the Prince Group also made a lot of compromises in secret. When it was tit for tat with the academics, it promised a lot of conditions to the Southeast Group and the Giant Group. This also meant that if Zhou Tong was successfully elected president at that time, even if the whole Prince Group went all out, it could only push a director who could protect Zhou Tong. This director position could only appear from Chen Fangqing or Guo Wentian. With Zhou Tong's existence, only one of them could go up. This was something that they knew each other since they became members of parliament. At that time, the Prince Group could be said to be the most direct competitors. However, no one had expected that 1 month before the election, Zhou Tong, who had been firmly suppressing Li Huaxing, would suddenly be pulled down by Li Huaxing. Furthermore, he was thrown into the abyss. Li Huaxing had caught up to Zhou Tong at the most crucial moment, and Zhou Tong had fallen from heaven to hell, or more accurately, into the desert. Zhou Tong went to the desert prison. Li Huaxing became the president of Zhongzhou State. The Prince Group had no time to react. In the end, they could only push Chen Fangqing and Guo Wentian together to become the directors of Zhongzhou State. Chen Fangqing was the prime minister, and Guo Wentian controlled the National Assembly. They are number 2 and number 3 in Central State. But even so, this is still the biggest fiasco and mistake of the Prince Group in recent decades. After becoming a director, The relationship between Chen Fangqing and Guo Wentian seems to have eased a lot, but the game between the two was too fierce, and there are still clear cracks inside the prince group. Chen Fangqing habitually considered problems from the perspective of the overall situation. What he saw was the overall situation, the future of Zhongzhou state, and the overall interests. Guo Wentian is more like the real leader of the prince group. He values the interests and future of the prince group more. In terms of structure, Chen Fangqing was far superior to Guo Wentian, but in terms of ability, Guo Wentian was slightly superior to Chen Fangqing. The ideas of the two were not exactly the same. For so many years, how could there be real harmony within the seemingly peaceful prince group? Chen Fangqing had been under a lot of pressure recently, and had almost lost sleep all night. He had to guard against the Southeast group, Li Tianlan and Li Huaqing. But most importantly, he had to guard against Guo Wentian, who had been quiet all the time. As his situation worsened, Chen Fangqing knew very well that Guo Wentian would definitely take action. But he did not expect that Guo Wentian would take action at this time. You are not optimistic about the final battle in Beihai? Chen Fangqing asked directly. He knew very well what Guo Wentian meant by that sentence. If the final battle in Beihai did not get the result they wanted, then he would retreat behind the scenes to cultivate. Once he retreated, there was basically no possibility for him to appear again. There was still nearly a year before the election. If he went to cultivate at this time, the entire prince group would fall into the hands of Guo Wentian. Guo Wentian obviously wanted to use this year to stabilize his position, even if he had to sacrifice a large part of his strength. And this sacrifice was obviously Chen Fangqing's team. No one can predict the future. I'm not optimistic or pessimistic. I just think that there are too many variables in this matter. Guo Wentian said faintly, Li Tianlan is not a fool. And neither is the Wang family of Beihai. Even if the power in your hands is very strong, I really don't believe that the other party will not have any precautions. Don't forget the strange intelligence channels of the Samsara Palace. How could they not know? And I can be sure that Li Tianlan took Li Shi back to Tiannan. On the night he received the letter of challenge, he went directly to the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in Heaven Capital. From Li Tianlan's departure to the present, no one has come out of Heaven Capital for 3 days. Even the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, which is about to start, didn't send a representative to watch the battle. Li Guangtu didn't tell you about sending a representative to watch the battle, did he? What do you mean? Chen Fangqing's body trembled slightly. He had not paid attention to Heaven Capital recently. This was the sincerity of his cooperation with Li Guangtu. They were all allies. Paying too much attention to each other would only cause misunderstanding. No one is sure what happened in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. But in 3 days, if you want to talk about people, even a dog has not come out of the headquarters of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital, and no one has entered it. The headquarters of the entire Purgatory of Heaven Capital. He was silent for a while and said in a hoarse voice, "It's like death." An indescribable chill spread all over Chen Fangqing's body in an instant. Is it? His voice trembled a little. Li Tianlan killed everyone in the Purgatory of Heaven Capital? I don't know. Guo Wentian said lightly. But just by this action, we can at least be sure that Li Tianlan already knows that Li Guangtu will participate in the decisive battle in North Sea. But Emperor Dong's palace has not shown the slightest retreat so far. Li Tianlan is not afraid of this at all. In this decisive battle, Li Tianlan is very likely to die. Oh, only you believe this, because you have to believe it. Chen Fangqing's face twitched. He stood there gloomily and did not speak. At the very least, even if you really win, it may not be a good thing. Guo Wentian continued. His Majesty and Li Guangtu, who you said will challenge Li Tianlan tonight, are not easy to deal with. Even if you win this time, you may also lose more miserably in the future. I won't lose. Chen Fangqing suddenly calmed down and said lightly. Maybe. Guo Wentian said quietly. You said the decisive battle in North Sea will start tonight. Then we will wait for the result tomorrow. You have been under too much pressure during this time, and everyone hopes you can take a rest. He deliberately emphasized the word everyone. Chen Fangqing narrowed his eyes, his face expressionless. Let's go back to Yuzhou. Guo Wentian moved forward slowly. You go back. Chen Fongqing said lightly. Guo Wentian looked at him in confusion. You're not leaving? I'm going to Xianyuan City now, and then fly to North Sea overnight. Chen Fongqing said expressionlessly. Chapter 976. The bright light shone in the dark room, a little dazzling. Light and darkness intertwined, faintly reflecting the outline in the living room. The sound of the softly shaking reclining chair kept ringing. Looking at the gloomy and mysterious living room through the screen, everyone in the conference room looked solemn and dignified. Wang Xiaoyao was facing the screen. Beside them, the two grandmasters of the invincible realm in East Island, Tianhai Wuji and Yagyu Kurumi, sat opposite each other. Then Jiang Guochu and Moraid, the current controller of Knights Templars. There were not many people in the conference room, but they represented a considerable part of the power of the dark world today. Everyone was really important in the dark world today. The light flowed in the conference room. The 5 invincible realm experts quietly stared at the gloomy darkness on the screen in front of them, without saying a word. The meeting had lasted for nearly an hour. But from beginning to end, no one spoke. Time passed minute by minute. After a long time, a clear voice suddenly sounded in the conference room. It was like the sound of the lid of a teacup gently touching the edge of the cup, soft, delicate, and extremely pleasant. The 5 invincible realm experts present subconsciously turned their eyes and looked at each other. Only then did they realize that the sound came from the other end of the screen. Wang Xiaorao narrowed his eyes. Moraid, Yagyu Kurumi, and Jiang Guochu stood up almost at the same time. Your Majesty. Sit down. On the other side of the screen, His Majesty's voice sounded, and he said unhurriedly, I'm sorry to keep you waiting. It's earlier than I expected. Wang Xiaorao said calmly. Are you ready? His expression was serious and peaceful, without a trace of impatience. Everyone present knew what the hour they had been waiting for meant. Wang Xiaorao subconsciously looked at the clock on the wall of the conference room. It was 8:05 p.m. in Zhongzhou State Time. At 10:27 p.m. 3 days ago, Li Tianlan returned to Xianyuan City from Yuzhou and received a letter of challenge from His Majesty. The summit appointment that had caused a sensation in the entire dark world was getting closer and closer. There were less than 3 hours left. Today, the representatives of most of the forces in the dark world had arrived in Xianyuan City. Behind each representative, there was at least a second-class force that was recognized by everyone. As the party of the summit appointment, His Majesty began his last meditation before the battle at noon that day, and he didn't wake up until now. This was truly a summit meeting. Li Tianlan and His Majesty might not be the only 2 people in the dark world with the combat capability beyond the peak of the invincible realm. But combined with their age, this battle was also endowed with extraordinary significance. The outcome of this battle directly determined who was the first person in the dark world of this era, and whose era it belonged to. His Majesty filled the cup in front of him with tea, and stretched his body. He smiled and said, It's very lively outside now. I can feel that everyone is here to watch the show. I'm going to appear. He glanced at Moraid and suddenly asked, Are there any new movements in the outside world's gambling? There's basically no change. Moraid's attitude was always more respectful than that of Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurumi. He lowered his head slightly and said softly, At present, the outside world is generally more optimistic about Li Tianlan. Nearly 70% of the gambling funds support Li Tianlan's victory. Close to 70%. That means less than 70%. Jiang Shangyu was a little surprised. That is to say, in the eyes of outsiders, I have a 64% chance of winning against Li Tianlan? Something like that. Moraid nodded. The summit appointment attracted the attention of the whole dark world. As soon as the news came out, the major financial forces in the dark world, including the Flourishing Age Fund, had already opened bets. They bet on the outcome, the time of the battle, the post-war injuries, and so on. 3 days was not a long time, but the bets had attracted countless funds. The news Moraid received showed that the amount of money betting on Li Tianlan's victory was infinitely close to 70%. But others might not believe it. At least half of the money was bet by Moraid. Moraid bet on Li Tianlan's victory. This was His Majesty's order. Therefore, in this so-called bet, those who were looking forward to an upset bet on Li Tianlan were destined to lose everything. You didn't play? His Majesty smiled and shifted his gaze from Moraid to the others. 600 million on Li Tianlan's victory, Tianhai Wuji said calmly. Yagyu Kurumi glanced at him and shook his head. 90 million on Li Tianlan. Beihai bet 2 billion on Li Tianlan. I personally bet 300 million on Li Tianlan. Wang Xiaoyao was expressionless. 1 billion. Li Tianlan. Jiang Guochu smiled lazily and said, no one expects to make a fortune by betting. It seems that there are more people who are optimistic about me than I thought. His Majesty smiled gently. Li Tianlan is strong, but how can those people judge clearly when they are in the same realm? There are countless people who want you to win. Many people think that Li Tianlan is not invincible. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was indifferent. Yes, His Majesty said softly. It's a pity that these people are going to be disappointed. The 5 invincible realm experts were indifferent. They knew the inside story of the final battle, so they all bet on Li Tianlan's victory under Moraid's lead. Before the battle began, His Majesty made it clear to them that he was not in his real peak state, so his odds of winning against Li Tianlan were less than 30%. This was a battle that he was almost certain to lose. How are your preparations going? His Majesty asked casually. There are no problems. As soon as the battle between you and Li Tianlan begins, we will take action immediately. Finally, we will meet at the foot of Mount Dibing. Wang Xiaoyao took a deep breath and said in a solemn tone, very good. His Majesty nodded and said, it's time for me to make a fool of myself. You know you will lose, but you still want to make a fool of yourself. Is it necessary? Tianhai Wuji casually asked. Ha! His Majesty's laughter was full of indifference. I will lose face tonight, but Li Tianlan will lose his life tonight. I will lose to Li Tianlan, and everyone will think that the future will be Li Tianlan's era. But he will die in Beihai tonight. The ultimate reversal. I like this feeling very much. Once he is dead, who will remember my failure? He picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. Believe me, I have been studying Li Tianlan for a long time. His current state is very wonderful, especially when he cooperates with Ruthless. Whether it is now or in the future, or in the past, even when Wang Tianzong was in his heyday, Li Tianlan can be said to be the most difficult person to kill. His kendo is perfect. His Majesty was silent for a while and whispered, but I don't believe that there is a so-called perfection in this world. No matter how perfect a martial arts is, there must be a weakness. Wang Xiaorao sat up straight and said seriously, what is Li Tianlan's weakness? I don't know. His Majesty shook his head. Tianhai Wuji sneered and said lightly, a weakness that is not known by others is equal to having no weakness. That's why I asked Li Tianlan to fight. His Majesty said coldly, it's okay for me to lose face once, but as long as I seize his weakness, tonight will be Li Tianlan's death. Chapter 977. Moraid raised his head and glanced at His Majesty. There was some doubt in his eyes. He wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. In the end, he didn't say anything. Others might not know His Majesty's origin, but Moraid was His Majesty's confidant and disciple. In contrast, he was completely different from Jiang Guochu and Yagyu Kurosumi. The latter two were more cooperative with His Majesty. Although His Majesty occupied a dominant position, the essential alliance relationship had not changed. Only Moraid worshipped His Majesty as a real leader. He knew His Majesty's origin and even knew a lot of things that hadn't been experienced in this era. He knew Li Tianlan, Dongqing Huangtu, and Gu Xianyan. Did His Majesty not know Li Tianlan's weakness in the story of the future or the past? As if noticing Moraid's gaze, His Majesty said calmly, I haven't fought with him. This sentence sounded a little inexplicable, but Moraid understood His Majesty's meaning in an instant. In that story, His Majesty had not fought with Dongqing Huangtu. All his understanding of him was summed up from limited intelligence, combined with some of his own speculations. When Dongqing Huangtu died, His Majesty was forced to fight and then returned here. Moraid was silent for a moment, and then laughed. His smile was a little ferocious and insidious. No one knew if he was thinking of His Majesty's forbearance, helplessness, and sadness in that story or something else. His voice was extremely firm. Your Majesty, don't worry. You are in Tiannan. Leave Beihai to me. His Majesty nodded and glanced at Wang Xiaorao. It has been arranged. Wang Xiaorao nodded. Call the number I gave you. As long as you can successfully leave the battlefield, he will meet you outside Xianyuan City. Are you sure there is no accident? His Majesty's voice was cautious and serious. If there is no accident, he and the helicopter have landed at the predetermined place. The only uncertainty is whether you can successfully leave the battlefield. As long as there is no accident, the helicopter will take you away from Tiannan at the fastest speed. In 30 minutes at most, you will appear at Nanyuan No. 2 Air Force Base. The fighter plane will arrive in Liaodong within an hour, and then someone will arrange for you to arrive at Beihai as soon as possible. Wang Xiaoyao's voice was flat and casual. The commander of the Tiannan Freedom Corps was Ning Ziyuan. It was impossible for Ning Ziyuan to betray Emperor Dong's palace and the Li family, but it didn't mean that the Freedom Corps was full of Li Tianlan's people. Ning Ziyuan was a member of the Southeast Group before Li Tianlan appeared. Di Jiang had also led the Tiannan Freedom Corps before, so it was too easy for Wang Xiaorao to plant some people there. His promise was strong enough. As long as His Majesty could leave the battlefield, he would be able to appear in the North Sea from Tiannan within 3 hours and participate in the upcoming battle in the North Sea. This speed was extremely fast. At the very least, he could guarantee that he would not be slower than Li Tianlan. Very good. His Majesty nodded. That's settled then. He slowly raised his hand and calmly said, the meeting ends here. Everyone, I will keep my promise and I hope that everyone can do their best. It's 8:25, Zhongzhou State Time. In the vague darkness, he revealed an incomparably arrogant smile, baring his fangs and brandishing his claws. In 12 hours, the dark world will officially welcome our era. Before hanging up, he said indifferently, let's meet again in North Sea. The screen went black. His Majesty had gone offline. Wang Xiaoyao stood up, came to the window of the conference room, and quietly looked at North Sea outside the window. This was still the hotel where he and Jiang Guochu met. The 5-star hotel under his feet, as well as the 202 branches all over the world, was an adult gift from Wang Tianzong when he was 18 years old. Wang Xiaoyao could still remember the scenes at that time, but he could no longer remember the excitement at that time. The night outside the window was quiet. It was snowing heavily. The wind and snow were blowing. Wang Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes tightly, and was silent for a long time. Let's get started, he said indifferently, turned around, bowed slightly to the other 4 invincible realm experts present, and said flatly, everyone please. 12 hours later, he would become the new patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai. The new era, the new history, was getting closer and closer. The dark cloak fluttered in the dark hall. 2 rows of guard-like armor stood quietly, as if they would never change. The crisp sound of footsteps echoed in the hall, making it seem extremely spacious. Mochizuki-san walked to an armor, expressionlessly stretched out his palm, and pressed it on the chest of the armor. A metal on the chest of the armor was pressed down by a pale and slender finger. Clatter! The sound of an object falling to the ground rang out in the silent hall, sounding extremely harsh. The moment the mechanism of the armor was activated, it swelled up. Countless black objects fell from the inside of the armor, and scattered under Mochizuki-san's feet. Mochizuki-san's expression did not change. He bent down to gather the things on the ground bit by bit. It was a lot of black solid matter. It looked like some kind of rubber or some kind of alloy. Piece by piece, it was dark all over. In the dark, it looked like pieces of dark muscles. Mochizuki-san squatted down expressionlessly, and covered one of the black muscles on his shoulder. Then his elbow, forearm, back, abdomen, legs, knees, and feet. This kind of alloy codenamed VX was not the top technology in the dark world. The alloy had been researched for more than a decade, and the formula had been leaked a few years ago. But there were not many people who were willing to use this alloy all the time. VX alloy's greatest function was to absorb a small amount of external force, minimizing the impact. This function could be said to be a divine function of a single-person armor. But its flaw was also extremely prominent, and that was the weight that was enough to affect flexibility. If VX alloy covered the whole body, it would weigh nearly 130 kilograms, and the cost was extremely high. Even a thunder-shocking realm expert would not be willing to bear such a heavy burden during a battle. Invincible realm experts could already ignore the weight of VX alloy. But every invincible realm expert in the dark world was a real big shot, and their combat equipment was not comparable to VX alloy at all. But Mochizuki-san had always liked this alloy. So did the master of Samsara Palace. What they liked was not the performance of VX alloy, but its camouflage function. Piece after piece of alloy reinforced her body. When Mochizuki-san stood up again, she had changed from a slender and tall beautiful woman to a tall and slightly fat figure that even looked a little burly. In the darkness, she reached out her palm. The sword energy surged, and the black cloak floating in the hall fell into her hand. Mochizuki-san slowly put on the wide cloak. Her figure slowly moved forward and walked out of the hall. Outside the hall, two figures with extremely strong auras stood quietly. The figure on the left was tall and burly, with bulging muscles. Every move of his was extremely aggressive. The figure beside him looked a little thin and quiet, but the danger he gave was no less than that of his companion. The black cloak walked out of the hall. The two men standing in front of the door with different figures were obviously stunned. The scene that seemed to have been sealed in the depths of their memories suddenly surged up. Their bodies stiffened, and they subconsciously muttered to themselves, "Palace Master." The figure under the cloak gave a faint hum. Everything felt like it was yesterday. The thin figure took a deep breath, and his emotions became extremely intense in an instant. "I will secretly enter Wulan State from here, and then cross Snow Country to Beihai from Wulan State." Under the cloak, Mochizuki-san's voice was faint, a little hoarse, and unquestionable. Even if the Jiang family of South America still has hidden forces, they are now delayed by Mr. Lin in South America. As for Sanctuary and Knights Templars, most of their forces have entered Beihai. Now it's too late for them to come back. So before the end of the final battle in Beihai, you are the top combat force in Europe. An extremely sharp killing intent surged out from under the cloak. "Here, I leave it to you, and so do Sanctuary and Knights Templars. Understood?" The two figures tightened their bodies and said in a deep voice, "Go." Mochizuki-san said faintly. The two looked at each other, quickly turned around, and left the hall. These two people were the trump cards left by Mochizuki-san to resist the external pressure. Under such circumstances, the top half-step invincible realm experts were enough to decide everything. And these two people were the top half-step invincible realm experts. They were silent for a long time. But none of them was a nobody. Samsara Palace Duke. Samsara Palace General. Chapter 978. When the screen dimmed, it seemed that the whole world became silent and clear. The tea swayed slightly. His Majesty lay back on the recliner, looked at the time silently, and waited patiently. The recliner creaked and shook with the same rhythm. His breathing slowed down. His heartbeat slowed down. His whole body and mind were completely relaxed. He felt the quieter and clearer world around him. His Majesty was motionless, like a dead thing. In absolute silence, the memories that had become a little fuzzy because of too long time surged in his mind. He was Jiang Shengyu. He had the heavenly king heart and the exquisite bone. In terms of martial arts talent, he was not inferior to Wang Shengxiao, Li Tianlan, or anyone else. Whether in the past or now, in the vast Zhongzhou state, or even the entire dark world, there were only two people of the younger generation who could be taken seriously by him: Li Tianlan and Wang Shengxiao. The former carried the dilapidated family on his back and moved forward. If he didn't move forward, he would die. The latter carried the glorious family on his back and was careful. If he didn't move forward, he would fall back. Many years ago, when Jiang Shengyu first heard the story of these two people, there was only one thought in his heart. It was tiring to live like this. Whether it was Li Tianlan or Jiang Shengyu, it was tiring to live like this. It was like a kind of transformation from a human to an inhuman. Countless halos, everyone's attention, a bumpy road ahead, a dangerous future, surging winds and clouds, magnificent waves, Stormy waves, being born as a human seemed to be like an origin. Standing at the origin, whether it was Li Tianlan or Wang Shengshao, they were born with the responsibility to move forward. So they strode on their own path, crossed everything, and smashed everything. If they failed, they would become dry bones on the road, from a human to a ghost. If they succeeded, they would set foot on the peak with glory, from a human to a god. If they failed, they would become stories and lessons. If they succeeded, they would become beliefs and symbols. They couldn't stay at the origin. They were born as human beings. From the very beginning, their life direction had been determined. Jiang Shangyu didn't like such a life. He had always thought that he was a person without ambition, and didn't want to pursue what he shouldn't get. He liked a quiet and warm life, a good family background, and a status that wouldn't be ignored or taken too seriously. He was very satisfied with all of this. If there were no accidents, he felt that he could guard the Jiang family and Beijiang for the rest of his life. It was warm, calm, and without sharpness. This was Jiang Shangyu when he was young. The year he entered the Deep Sea Academy, he was 22 years old, and his personality had not changed much from his youth. He did not establish his own force within the academy, and the reason why he rarely fought with others was because of the academy's missions. He did not hurt the friendliness of others, and was always kind to others. Everyone knew that he was very strong, so no one was willing to provoke him, and he did not provoke others either. Gentle temperament, easy to get along with, low-key but powerful. During his 3 years in the Deep Sea Academy, he had made friends all over the academy, even in the Sky Academy. Among them was Li Tianlan. It might not be appropriate to call them friends. He and Li Tianlan never had a heart-to-heart talk. Their friendship seemed to be limited to sitting together and chatting. At that time, Li Tianlan was proud and arrogant. During the 3 years in the Sky Academy, he showed off his abilities. The life of holding the little princess of Beihai in his left arm, and the daughter of the Dongqing clan in his right arm, could be said to be the peak of everyone's dream. At the end of the first academic year of the two academies, Wang Tianzong personally went to the Li family's camp to propose marriage, promising to marry Wang Yuetong to Li Tianlan, and their first child in the future could be surnamed Li. No one knew whether it was because of guilt or other reasons. Li Honghe joined the Wang family of Beihai. The Li family left the camp in the second year of the two academies and took root in Jiangxia. At the beginning of the third year, Li Tianlan, who had recultivated, was well prepared. 3 months after entering the Thundershocking Realm, he went straight to the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and completely defeated Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, in 45 seconds. Li Tianlan was 22 years old that year. He was the youngest expert at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm in the entire Dark World in 100 years. From that time on, Gu Hanshan completely fell from the ranks of the top geniuses. People called him and Wang Xingxiao the Young Chosen One a thing of the past. That year, Wang Xingxiao successfully broke through and entered the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao. The Gemini stars of Beihai shone on each other, and their names resounded throughout the Dark World. Jiang Shangyu, who was undisciplined, did not alienate Li Tianlan at that time, but he did not deliberately get close to him either. At that time, he had been thinking about his Jiang family and Beijiang. He wanted to protect everything he had and live a quiet life. The friendship between gentlemen was as indifferent as water. He did not know whether he and Li Tianlan were gentlemen or not, but the friendship between them was really as indifferent as water. If Li Tianlan had not suddenly and violently turned against the Wang family of Beihai in the end, the friendship between them might have lasted for a lifetime. When they were old, they might have become real friends or even confidants. This was also the main reason for the silence of the Southeast group. Li Tianlan wanted Beijiang. The Jiang family, Jiang Shangyu, other people, other forces, Li Tianlan didn't even look at it. He was indeed qualified to be arrogant. All the resistance of the Jiang family was directly disintegrated by Emperor Dong's palace. The provincial government of Beijiang was directly reorganized, the direction of the parliament changed, the military retreated, and the industry of the Jiang family suffered a fatal blow overnight. Jiang Shangyu looked for Li Tianlan. He said that he just wanted to guard Beijiang and the Jiang family. At that time, Li Tianlan looked at him for a long time. The Jiang family is yours, but Beijiang is not. That was his answer. The Jiang family persisted in Beijiang for more than a year. Emperor Dong's palace continued to develop in Beijiang, and the Jiang family almost became a joke. 28 years old. Li Tianlan, who had not entered the invincible realm, broke through again. Supremacy. Jiang Shan, who was completely at the end of his rope, could only look for Li Tianlan to beg for mercy. Li Tianlan let the Jiang family go, just like letting go of an ant. He also casually took something from her. He took away Jiang Shan's heart. His memory was a little fuzzy. Jiang Shangyu didn't know what Jiang Shan had done to turn the tables in that year, and angered Li Tianlan. It didn't matter. Right and wrong were meaningless. Jiang Shangyu only knew that he was guarding the broken Jiang family. Watching countless so-called super forces in the dark world bow down to Emperor Dong's palace. Watching Kunlun City fall apart little by little. Watching the Wang family of Beihai's influence decline. Watching the Wang family of Beihai win Gu Xingyun again in order to turn the tables, and watching Li Tianlan die. Half a year after the fall of the Chosen One, he was forced to go to Beihai, facing the completely crazy woman, and the completely crazy sword. The sword light rose with the wind, and the poison followed like a shadow. He fell into the darkness, and when he opened his eyes, he returned to his childhood. The scars on his body clearly recorded what had happened. Right and wrong really didn't matter anymore, and he couldn't tell. Jiang Shangyu became his majesty. In this life he still didn't have too much ambition, but he had an obsession. Li Tianlan owed the Jiang family a heart. He wanted to get it back. He wanted to build a dynasty that could completely destroy Emperor Dong's palace from the front. In that era when he was extremely powerless, under the glory of Emperor Dong's palace, even the invincible realm experts had to bow down to the thunder-shocking realm experts of Emperor Dong's palace. Peak of the invincible realm? Super forces? Top experts? They were as humble as dust, as nonentities, as wild dogs, worthless and not worth mentioning. Jiang Shangyu didn't want to experience that era again. He didn't want to be a ghost, nor a dog. He just wanted to live like a human being. The bell rang in the dark living room. The bell reverberated and rang 10 times in a row. At 22 o'clock at night, Jiang Shangyu moved his body slowly. Time was passing. Tick-tock. Jiang Shangyu stood up and drank the tea beside him. He closed his eyes and felt every part of his body, every joint, every muscle, and even every cell. He stood there quietly, but all the power in his body was unprecedentedly active and surging. The darkness in the living room grew deeper and deeper, swallowing the light and covering everything. At 22:15, he opened his eyes. In the dark room, the world in front of him became extremely clear. His heart was beating slowly. In a place not too far away from Xianyuan City, another faint heartbeat completely overlapped with his own heartbeat. The extreme darkness slowly condensed in the living room. Jiang Shangyu's body disappeared little by little quietly. An incomparably violent heartbeat suddenly rang out in the empty living room, like the roar of thunder. The darkness spread out, rushed out of the living room, rushed out of the courtyard, rolled over the sky, and covered the stars. It was boundless. That was the purest domain of the dark world in the past 100 years. You saw heaven and earth. The world in your sight was me. Chapter 979. The sky became darker in the darkness. On the lawn inside Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan, who had been quietly standing there with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes when he heard the violent heartbeat in the distance. It could not be said that they were telepathic or attracted to each other. The moment he opened his eyes, the world in front of him seemed to have changed. The subtle and rapid changes kept moving forward, covering Xianyuan City, Emperor Dong's palace, and the whole world. The night was darker, and the night was quieter. The world was originally quiet. In the corner of Emperor Dong's palace stood many figures with powerful auras. They were all representatives of the superpowers in the dark world. The summit appointment caused a sensation in the dark world. All the superpowers had submitted applications to Emperor Dong's palace before the final battle. Everyone wanted to be a witness of this battle. Li Tianlan personally made the decision and sent an invitation to all the second-class superpowers in the dark world. Most of the superpowers sent representatives to watch the battle, except for two. One was the Purgatory of Heaven capital. The other was the Wang family of Beihai. The representatives of the superpowers stood in different corners and waited silently. It could be said that Li Tianlan's confidence to let the whole dark world witness this summit appointment. It could also be regarded as a naked show of force by Emperor Dong's palace. The representatives of the superpowers needed this battle to determine the terror of the supreme combat capability in the dark world, and to determine their attitude. Li Tianlan also needed them to witness this battle to completely establish the position of Emperor Dong's palace. Tonight, at this moment, Li Tianlan won this summit appointment. He was the real Emperor Dong, which meant that the shadow of the Sword Emperor would completely disappear. Li Tianlan breathed softly. He stepped on the grass with his bare feet and took a step forward. The darkness in the distance approached Emperor Dong's palace in an instant. Countless eyes were gathered on Li Tianlan. At this moment, the representatives of the superpowers didn't notice anything unusual, but they instinctively felt a little uneasy. Li Tianlan silently looked at the night sky in the distance. The darkness that seemed to be integrated with the night spread rapidly in the distance and covered everything. Bang! The second violent heartbeat suddenly rang out. In an instant, darkness completely covered the whole Emperor Dong's palace. Like smoke, like fog, dead silence, gloomy. All the lights in Emperor Dong's palace disappeared in an instant. The starry sky was completely swallowed by darkness, leaving only darkness between heaven and earth. Lightless city. A night without light. All the spectators couldn't even see the battlefield. There was only darkness left in front of Li Tianlan. Why did you choose to be my enemy? A calm and gentle voice rang out without warning. It rang in Li Tianlan's ears. It rang in everyone's ears in Emperor Dong's palace. The voice was low and sweet, and it kept echoing within the area of Emperor Dong's palace. Sound. Li Tianlan's pupils contracted slowly, and his eyes became extremely focused. It really is you. After a pause he continued. It's really you. His tone seemed to contain countless emotions, but it also seemed like he had no emotions at all. Who am I? In the darkness, the voice was like the whisper of a demon, reverberating in everyone's ears. Li Tianlan opened his mouth. He seemed to want to say something, but he suddenly fell silent. The voice was so clear and familiar. This was the voice that Li Tianlan had heard just a few days ago. He was sure that it was Jiang Shangyu's voice. The information given to him by the military counselor said that the mysterious master came from the Jiang family, and it was very likely that it was Jiang Shangyu. All of this was consistent with the information. Why Jiang Shangyu had this kind of combat capability was not important now. The important thing was this voice in the darkness really Jiang Shangyu? If it was Jiang Shangyu, why did he take action now? The last time he met Jiang Shangyu was 4 days ago. The night before that day, he flew from Tiannan to Huading and killed Zhu with one blow. Then, in the middle of the night, he went directly from Yuzhou to Kunlun City in Beijiang, seriously injured Gu Xingyun, and took Li Qingqing away. Jiang Shangyu went to the hospital because of Li Qingqing. He traveled thousands of miles in a day, and faced 2 invincible realm experts. There was no doubt that Li Tianlan consumed some energy. No matter how big or small the consumption was, it always existed objectively. If Jiang Shangyu wanted to take action, it was the best choice to fall out with him that day. Moreover, Li Qingqing happened to be in the hospital at that time. But he chose to give in and chose to fight today. Why? There seemed to be many reasons, but no matter which one, it was a bit far-fetched. The most reasonable explanation was that Jiang Shangyu did not have the ability to challenge Li Tianlan that day. If Jiang Shangyu didn't have this ability that day, then was the voice in the darkness Jiang Shangyu really Jiang Shangyu? Who are you? Li Tianlan took the initiative to ask. His voice could not be covered by the darkness, and it also resounded through the whole world. It's really you. It's really you. Who am I? Who are you? The summit meeting at the highest level, the inexplicable conversation, in the darkness, everything seemed extremely strange. The vast sword energy filled the whole Emperor Dong's palace, blending with the ubiquitous darkness and constantly fighting against it. It was completely dark in front of her. A wind of nothingness blew through the luxurious living room. In the absolute darkness, dazzling bright sword light appeared one after another. The light was boundless. Li Tianlan stood in the center of the light, raised his head, and looked up at the enemy in front of him. His sword light did not pierce the darkness in front of him, but it illuminated the enemy in front of him. A figure more than 20 meters tall stood silently in front of Li Tianlan. He looked down at Li Tianlan, like a giant looking at an ant. In the darkness, Jiang Shangyu's voice rang out. Is it fun? But Li Tianlan turned into a sword light in an instant. It was a soundless step, a step without any smoke or fire. His bare feet stepped on the giant's head. In the darkness, he became the most dazzling and blazing blade. Light. The sword light all over the sky did not break out, but quickly gathered toward Li Tianlan's body and condensed to the extreme. Countless sword lights and monstrous sword qi completely illuminated the whole night at this moment. The light shrank along Li Tianlan's body. The 9 shadows disappeared one by one. Li Tianlan's body became brighter and brighter, more and more dazzling. The 6 arms of the giant frantically grabbed his head. Li Tianlan gently stamped his feet. He was not ruthless. He was barehanded. His whole body was like the sharpest magic weapon in the world, and also like the most dazzling light in the world, piercing the darkness in an instant. Endless light tore the giant's body in the darkness, and it fell down. The giant's figure was broken by the sword light little by little. The giant disappeared. Li Tianlan stood on the ground, looked at the surging darkness, and narrowed his eyes. What are you looking for? A soft, low, but extremely strange voice rang in Li Tianlan's ears. There seemed to be chaos around Emperor Dong's palace, but Li Tianlan did not hear any sound in his perception. Only the clear sound of footsteps could be heard in front of him. Jiang Shangyu's figure came out of the darkness. Li Tianlan looked at Jiang Shangyu, expressionless, and did not mean to speak at all. Jiang Shangyu's body stood 20 meters away from Li Tianlan. His figure stopped, but the footsteps did not disappear. Instead, they became clearer and more frequent. It was as if hundreds or thousands of people had walked into the darkness, and then walked out from the darkness. They came out. A figure walked through the darkness. Another one. There were more and more figures in the darkness. They were all Jiang Shangyu. Every one of them was Jiang Shangyu. 100, 300, 500, 1,000. Countless Jiang Shangyu completely surrounded Li Tianlan in the middle. I'm right here. All the Jiang Shangyu spoke at the same time, with a roar of voices. What are you looking for? Countless Jiang Shangyu did the same action. They pressed their faces. In an instant, hundreds of Jiang Shangyu all turned into Li Tianlan's appearance. Li Tianlan stood in the middle, surrounded by countless himself. The voice in the darkness laughed, and even the voice seemed to be exactly the same as Li Tianlan's. Li Tianlan looked at the strange smiling faces on the faces of countless people around him, and his face became cold little by little. Are you looking for me? The darkness was still surging. All the Jiang Shangyu became Qin Wei Bai. Are you looking for me? His voice was a little pitiful and mocking. Poor thing who has been cheated, can you still find me? Chapter 981. Li Tianlan stood where he was and narrowed his eyes. The countless Qin Wei Bais around him did not decrease. Instead, there were more and more. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of identical figures occupied every place in his field of vision. In front of him, in the distance, beside him, behind him, and in the sky, there were Qin Wei Bais everywhere. They were clear and vague. The darkness floated quietly around him, like the night of the world. Everything seemed to be the same as the ordinary night. Countless Qin Wei Bais were half hidden in the darkness in the distance, forming a breathtaking but extremely terrifying picture. The world seemed to be dead. There was no sound at all, only eternal darkness. This was a domain beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Not to mention other people in the dark world, even Li Tianlan himself had encountered such an opponent for the first time. His invincible confidence had never been shaken, but now he really did not see the direction of this martial arts clearly. This could not even be called martial arts. In terms of combat capability and destructive power, Jiang Shangyu was not the strongest. But the extreme change of the domain after surpassing the peak of the invincible realm made Jiang Shangyu the most difficult person to kill and defeat. The dark domain in front of him was extremely clear, but it surrounded him in a trance. It was an indescribable feeling. The other party's domain was in front of him. He could see it, but he could not feel it, let alone destroy it. In the dark domain, everything was divorced from reality, but it had substance. To some extent, they might also be a kind of reality, the reality that only belonged to Jiang Shangyu. For example, the image of the giant that penetrated the sky and the earth, and the boundless figures now, weird, changeable, and incredible. In his own domain, Jiang Shangyu was almost invincible. Hiding the head and showing the tail, is this the battle in your heart? Li Tianlan said slowly. His voice was calm, without any wavering or other emotions. I'm right in front of you. Jiang Shangyu smiled faintly. The world you see is me. The boundless crowd in front of him began to change. The figures of Qin Weibais kept twisting and turning into different people one after another. Men and women, old and children, countless people, completely different people. Bang! Li Tianlan's heart beat violently. The heartbeat seemed to drive a great force, and the darkness in front of him suddenly twisted for a moment. Layers of seemingly endless sword intent once again surged in the realm of darkness. Jiang Shangyu's cold voice resounded through the whole field. Are you going to risk your life? If you can't see through my domain, you'll die here tonight. In the darkness, countless sword qis kept rising. Li Tianlan glanced at the crowd in front of him. The crowd was still changing, and the number of people seemed to be increasing. Everything in front of him, apart from the darkness, was only the silhouettes of people in the dark. I can't see through it, he said faintly and slowly closed his eyes. The figure in front of him disappeared. Only darkness existed. The only difference between opening and closing his eyes was the lack of countless figures in front of him. Jiang Shangyu's remaining laughter suddenly disappeared. The corners of Li Tianlan's mouth lifted slightly. His clothes were torn and wrinkled. In the dark, he stood on the ground with his bare feet on the bed. His eyes were closed, and he was motionless. But at this moment, Li Tianlan gave Jiang Shangyu a deadly sense of danger. If he couldn't see through it, then he wouldn't look at it. This was Li Tianlan's choice. A gust of wind appeared in the realm of darkness. Countless footsteps could be heard. The footsteps became more and more hurried, faster and faster, pressing in from all directions. Whoosh! In the dull sound, a clenched fist slammed into Li Tianlan's face. This seemed to be just the beginning. The next second, overwhelming attacks instantly rushed in front of Li Tianlan. The endless crowd rushed toward Li Tianlan. They were weak and small, but extremely dense. The attack power of each person was not even as good as that of an ordinary person. But there were too many people, and everyone seemed to be desperately trying to hurt Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan took a gentle step forward. The dazzling sword light suddenly shone in the darkness. The sword light cut into the crowd without any hesitation. In the blink of an eye, there was an open space in front of Li Tianlan. There was no blood, no corpses. As the sword light passed, all the figures nearby disappeared. The next second, the figures behind filled the void and rushed toward Li Tianlan again. Dong, dong, dong. The loud heartbeat sounded in the crowd. The sound was getting louder and louder, as if it resonated with the whole world. The whole dark realm was shaking slightly. The ubiquitous sword energy in the realm began to spin faster and faster. In the darkness, the extremely bright sword light lit up in every corner of the realm. The crowd all over the realm disappeared one by one, and turned into nothingness. Only the sword light was getting brighter and brighter. Boom! There seemed to be a sudden clap of thunder in his ears. The dazzling lightning lit up in the darkness. Several figures burned with blue electric arcs and directly hit the sword energy in front of Li Tianlan. One after another. Each figure was like a full blow from a thunder-shocking realm expert. There was no pause, no interval. The dense figures approached Li Tianlan crazily, and then disappeared under the sword light. There were fewer and fewer figures in the realm, but their strength was getting stronger and stronger. The figures of the thunder-shocking realm began to appear. Then came the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. Then came the half-step invincible realm. One after another, the illusory figures with real power exploded in front of Li Tianlan, as if they were self-detonating. Li Tianlan kept moving forward, heading in a certain direction in the darkness. He was firm. The figures of the thunder-shocking realm disappeared. The dark realm became extremely empty. A few figures were still appearing, and all of them were of the half-step invincible realm. The suicidal attacks came one after another. The sword energy in front of Li Tianlan finally began to dissipate little by little. From beginning to end, Li Tianlan didn't open his eyes. The experts of the half-step invincible realm disappeared. The figures in the huge dark realm were almost completely gone. Amidst the heavy footsteps, a few remaining figures slowly approached. There was no communication. Attack. The majestic power suddenly exploded around Li Tianlan. From all directions and in all directions, the frenzied attacks brought forth wave after wave of torrents of power. There was no realm or sword energy, but this was indeed the power of the invincible realm. The power of several invincible realm experts. In the dark world, Li Tianlan opened his hands. His entire person seemed to have once again turned into a sharp divine weapon that could shake the world. With him as the center, the violent sword energy suddenly broke through the obstacles around him and lit up the whole realm in an instant. Several violent currents of power were completely torn apart, and several figures of the invincible realm in the realm were directly smashed into nothingness at the moment when the sword light broke out. I see. Li Tianlan stood where he was, and his voice was soft. Jiang Shangyu didn't speak. There was dead silence in the dark realm. This is your realm? Li Tianlan laughed. It wasn't until this moment that he understood Jiang Shangyu's so-called realm, and the extreme changes of the realm above the peak of the invincible realm. In his own realm, Jiang Shangyu was almost omnipotent. As long as his stamina and strength were sufficient, he could do anything. He could become a giant that surpassed reality, and the densely packed figures could transform as he wished. No matter how he transformed, the essence of this transformation was power. It was the power of Jiang Shangyu. If he wanted, he could even use his power to create dragons, ghosts, and even missiles and fighter jets in his own realm. Fancy things. He could do whatever he wanted. But no matter what he made, the power of the things he made had a limit. What was Jiang Shangyu's limit? The things he made in the realm would be one level lower than his limit. This was the realm after the peak of the invincible realm. It was an incomparably real illusion. The realm in front of him could be said to be Jiang Shangyu's world. A world that belonged only to him. Li Tianlan stood quietly in the same place, keeping his hands open. It suddenly rained in the dark world. The extremely condensed raindrops fell from the sky, and each raindrop carried extremely pure sword energy. Li Tianlan's figure flashed in each raindrop. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, covering the whole realm. Li Tianlan's smile became more and more obvious. He opened his eyes and muttered to himself, I see you. Chapter 982. The rain condensed by the sword chi continued to fall, from light to dense, hurried, and violent. There was a violent roar in the dark domain. The sword rain was like a waterfall, as if to overturn the whole world. Li Tianlan's figure appeared in every drop of rain. Every drop of rain was his eyes, and even his body. The rain spread out from Li Tianlan's head and covered the whole domain. The next second, Li Tianlan's figure disappeared. The strong sword light, like a meteor, instantly condensed into one point and stabbed straight into the void in the darkness. Light and darkness suddenly intertwined. Wherever the sword light passed, the darkness of the void boiled completely, and the violent power held up against the dazzling sword light. The next moment, Li Tianlan and Jiang Shangyu's figures instantly drew closer. Attack. The crazy roar of the dragon reached its peak in an instant. At such a close distance, there was almost no room for the two sides to dodge. Li Tianlan's body seemed to be pulled by his own strength, and the dragon fist full of absolute explosive power directly hit Jiang Shangyu's chest. Jiang Shangyu had completely integrated with the darkness. His body was dark, and his whole body seemed to be weightless. The fist that hit his face drove his body to float back half a meter. The moment he avoided the attack, Jiang Shangyu's whole person changed completely. Strong, cold, and crazy. Weird. The whites of Jiang Shangyu's eyes were completely occupied by the black eyeballs. In the darkness, his dark eyes reflected Li Tianlan's every move. His will was absolutely focused, and the storm-like attacks did not stop for a moment. Jiang Shangyu could always dodge half a second, or even a few tenths of a second in advance. The darkness and the sword light constantly blended and collided, and the two figures seemed to completely become two flickering ghosts. Dodge, attack, and counterattack. Jiang Shangyu's movements were not as fast as Li Tianlan's, but his perception seemed to be more sensitive than Li Tianlan's. He could always predict Li Tianlan's movements one step ahead. Most of the time, he was dodging, but every counterattack was fatal and dangerous. The dragon roar became louder and louder. Li Tianlan was completely combining the 72 styles of Dragon Fist at will. The overwhelming dragon shadow with majestic power crazily bombarded everything in front of it. Blood splashed out in the darkness. In an instant, the two of them were covered in wounds. Jiang Shangyu's eyes were completely focused, and his dark pupils became more and more terrifying. The moment the blood fell to the ground along the wound, he suddenly stopped. Li Tianlan rushed forward. This time, he didn't use ruthlessness at the summit. He didn't even have a sword in his hand. But at this moment, his whole body was full of sharp sword light. The sword light was like a tide, completely locking Jiang Shangyu. Heh! Amidst the faint sneer, Jiang Shangyu suddenly retreated. His retreat continued to accelerate. The sword light flew wantonly around him, and blood splattered. He directly withstood countless sword lights with his own body, and once again got rid of Li Tianlan's blockade. The dark domain surged crazily. Within the domain, torrential rain poured down crazily. Li Tianlan frowned slightly. He couldn't find where Jiang Shangyu was at the moment. Experts who had reached this stage from the domain path were undoubtedly the most troublesome to deal with. In their own domain, they were almost omniscient and omnipotent. Their close combat abilities might be average, but if they hid in their own domain and were not discovered by others, they would be able to exhaust most of their opponents to death. The seemingly substantial darkness was constantly twisting. In the heavy rain, before Li Tianlan could perceive Jiang Shangyu's position, the innumerable darkness had condensed together and changed its shape. The boundless darkness condensed into extremely ferocious-looking machines one after another. Huge and incredibly huge barrels stretched out from the machines. One by one, two more and more densely packed. Without any hesitation, all the barrels fired at the same time. One by one, the cannonballs condensed by the darkness suddenly flew out, covering the sky and the earth. They exploded wildly around Li Tianlan, and the world seemed to be completely overturned. The violent vibration and the strong shock wave tore Li Tianlan's body, which was extremely real. At this moment, Li Tianlan seemed to be really in a tragic battlefield. There were cannonballs and explosions everywhere. Although there was no smoke and fire, the power was almost the same. The cannonball fire covered the entire domain. Countless cannonballs exploded everywhere in the domain. There were more and more ferocious black turrets, and the firepower was getting more and more violent. Without any hesitation, Li Tianlan went straight forward and swept his arm. The dazzling sword light brought an arc of light up to 100 meters long in front of him. The sharp edge tore the huge turret in front of him. The dark turret disintegrated in the air, and then turned into things like armored vehicles and tanks. The cannonball fire became more and more intense, and a large number of tanks directly rolled toward Li Tianlan's face. The darkness was still surging. Silently, a huge shadow flew over from the sky. It was in the shape of a fighter plane, but the body was densely packed with cannons. Countless cannons flashed in the dark in silence, and all aimed at Li Tianlan. This was destined to be an eye-opener for everyone in the dark world. Not to mention others, even Li Tianlan had learned something new. This was the real domain. Within the domain, this was Jiang Shangyu's own world. As long as he had enough strength, as long as his will could continue to fight, everything he imagined could be completely condensed in his own domain with his own strength. It was endless. If Li Tianlan couldn't find a way to break the situation, his physical strength would be exhausted little by little, and he would eventually die here. This way of fighting might take a long time, but the possibility was real. The cannonball poured down silently. Main battle tanks, armored vehicles, fighter planes, cannons, rocket launchers, grenades, and all the modern weapons that could be imagined were materialized by martial arts in this domain of martial arts. The pressure was getting greater and greater. Li Tianlan couldn't move an inch. So he stopped. Boundless sword light surrounded him, forming a cocoon that was almost solid. The crazy cannonball fire hit the cocoon around him, causing ripples after ripples. Li Tianlan's eyes were cold. A touch of impatience gradually appeared on his face. With an impatient expression he said calmly, "You've had enough fun, so?" Li Tianlan's aura suddenly fell to the bottom. "It's time to end it." His light voice rang in every corner of the domain. Li Tianlan raised his palm. The aura that had fallen to the bottom began to rise as he raised his hand. Qi controlling realm, ice condensing realm, fire flaming realm, thunder shocking realm, peak of thunder shocking realm. The aura that vaguely surpassed the peak of the invincible realm completely disappeared. At this moment, Li Tianlan's strength was at the peak of the thunder shocking realm. A dazzling blue electric arc lit up on his fingertip, bringing with it sword light, sword intent, and sword energy. Li Tianlan's face turned slightly pale for a moment. Under the bombardment of countless cannonballs in the darkness, he flicked his fingers gently. Crack! Amidst the subtle sound, the blue electric arc flashed in the darkness. The next moment, the whole domain was full of blue lightning. The lightning flickered, completely twisting, exploding, and spreading in the most extreme way, covering everything with the purest destruction. The endless cannonball fire disappeared in an instant. All the cannons and weapons were crushed into powder by the extreme twisting blue lightning. Crack! Only a faint crackling sound could be heard, with an inconceivable frequency, getting faster and faster, faster and faster. The whole domain was completely occupied by lightning. Crack! Jiang Shangyu's incredulous voice sounded. This is... He hadn't finished his words. Everything was gone. The cannonball fire, weapons, and Li Tianlan all disappeared completely. Jiang Shangyu stood in the darkness, and his heart kept sinking. He glanced around vigilantly, and his eyes became more and more solemn. In the empty domain, Li Tianlan's voice sounded beside him. What are you looking for? Divine Emperor of 9 Heavens. Chapter 983. The incomparably dense darkness completely wrapped his whole body, and he was completely integrated with the darkness. It was the darkness itself, the domain, the world, and the air. In this state, the domain was not a part of him, but he had become a part of the domain. In today's dark world, he was the only one who had broken through the peak of the invincible realm from the direction of the domain, and entered a new level. Even in the story he once lived, he was the only one who had entered this level in this direction. In terms of actual combat capability, he was indeed not in his heyday now, but he knew very well how to optimize his path. What he wanted was not only a complete recovery, he wanted to completely surpass himself in his heyday. Finding Moraid was the first step, and seeing the old man whose mental strength had reached the transcendent realm in the Holy Land was the second step. Now he had done a better job in the variability and authenticity of the domain than in his heyday. Back then, Dongqing Huangtu had his own day and night. The path that Jiang Shangyu pursued was a clear illusion. So he had enough confidence to challenge Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu didn't think he could win, but he didn't think he would lose either. At least he wouldn't suffer a loss. Li Tianlan had never faced an opponent like him, so he hid in the domain and was invincible. In the first fight under normal circumstances, Jiang Shangyu was sure that Li Tianlan couldn't find him and see all his trump cards. Jiang Shangyu could carefully observe Li Tianlan's state when Li Tianlan didn't know him well enough. He had always been very confused about Li Tianlan's current state. Jiang Shangyu was very clear about his own situation. He was different from Li Tianlan. He used to be a super expert who had surpassed the peak of the invincible realm. His martial arts might not be perfect, but after all, the foundation of his body was still there. Even if he experienced growing up again, he had the foundation in his body, just like the master of Samsara Palace. So they could bear the power of the peak of the invincible realm, or even more powerful with their relatively young bodies. Their physical conditions had laid the foundation in the past. So they didn't need to break through. They just needed to recover. But Li Tianlan was different. He could be said to be Dongqing Huangtu in that story, but in reality, he was Li Tianlan. Time travel, rebirth, recovery, all the words couldn't be used on him. His martial arts needed to go step by step and break through bit by bit. His physical foundation was also getting stronger little by little, but it was far from perfect. Li Tianlan was 24 years old this year. Under normal circumstances, his body could bear the power from the peak of the thunder-shocking realm to the half-step invincible realm at most, but what he exerted was the combat capability beyond the peak of the invincible realm. How did he do it? Li Tianlan was like that. So was Dongqing Huangtu in the past or in the future? In that incomparably true story, Dongqing Huangtu entered the secular world at the age of 19. The year he parted ways with the Wang family of Beihai. He was 27, but he defeated Wang Tianzong. At that time, he had not really entered the invincible realm. The year Dongqing Huangtu died, he was 29 years old. From 27 to 29 he didn't enter the invincible realm, but he completed the final transformation. The whole world did not know Dongqing Huangtu's secret. Even after his death, no one knew. Maybe Gu Xianyan knew it at that time, but no one was sure about it. And now, this was the secret that Jiang Shangyu wanted to know the most. It was the key to him suppressing Li Tianlan, and even the key to his complete transformation to the Supreme. He urgently needed to know what was going on with Li Tianlan's current state. Then, in the seemingly not very fierce but extremely strange and dangerous battle, Jiang Shangyu saw the extremely twisted blue lightning in Li Tianlan's hand. All the secrets were hidden in that seemingly unremarkable bolt of lightning. At that moment, Jiang Shangyu's scalp went numb, and he once again felt a long-lost panic in his heart. Perhaps most people did not know what that lightning meant. But standing at Jiang Shangyu's level, he clearly perceived how terrible the nature of that lightning was. Fast. That lightning with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was too fast. No matter how fast a lightning with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm was, it could not threaten Jiang Shangyu in the domain. But the problem was that the lightning was not fast. It was the frequency. That extremely twisted frequency. Jiang Shangyu could not determine how fast the lightning twisted, but he could be sure that within a second, the lightning in Li Tianlan's hand directly twisted thousands of times. Every time it twisted, it was almost equivalent to the full outbreak of an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. At that moment, it was equivalent to countless experts of the thunder-shocking realm attacking at the same time. The spreading lightning covered the whole domain. Every ray of light, every trace of light arc, and every glimmer of light was equivalent to an expert at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm. This was Li Tianlan's current state. His body could not bear the great pressure brought by the invincible realm. But his martial arts were perfect. The dual wind and thunder veins brought him unimaginable strength and speed, and the strong vitality of the dragon vein gave him absolute recovery. In the state of outbreak, when his aura fell to the bottom, his whole body had been completely relaxed. His strength was condensed to the limit in a second, but it was not a one-time outbreak. Li Tianlan divided his strength and sword intent into countless parts, each of which was at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, layer upon layer. Every part of the power was perfectly within the range that his body could bear. The frequency of every attack, the frequency of the lightning twisting, and the speed of recovery of the body formed a perfect balance. Jiang Shangyu did not know what this meant, but he could be sure that when there were a certain number of experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even the real chosen one could not withstand the siege of absolute numbers. How many people at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were there in the whole dark world? This realm originally represented the limit of ordinary geniuses. Every second that the seemingly weak lightning kept twisting, or even every millisecond, represented an earth-shattering power that could kill an ordinary expert of the invincible realm in seconds. And this level of full attack was not too much of a burden for Li Tianlan, which meant that as long as Li Tianlan wanted to do it, he could maintain this terrifying and unimaginable state. This time might be very short, 30 seconds, 1 minute. But combined with the twisting frequency of the lightning, it was too long to maintain this state for a second. What if Li Tianlan was willing to pay a certain price? Could he raise the power of the peak of the thundershocking realm to the half-step invincible realm? Or even to the invincible realm? In that state, Li Tianlan would definitely be seriously injured, but everything in front of him would be completely torn apart. What would it be like when this high-frequency twisting power reached the peak of the invincible realm? Jiang Shangyu's heart suddenly turned cold. Unparalleled fear occupied all his consciousness in an instant. He did not dare to imagine that picture at all. Now Li Tianlan could twist the lightning thousands of times in a second without getting hurt. As his physical fitness continued to improve, how terrifying would it be when he could twist the sword intent of the peak of the invincible realm thousands of times in a second? Thousands of experts at the peak of the invincible realm would attack at the same time? That was the power that could completely challenge the whole world. Jiang Shangyu could be sure that even Dongcheng Huangtu had not reached this level at his peak. Did this mean that Li Tianlan was very close to Dongcheng Huangtu? Countless images and speculations kept flashing in his mind. Invincible. For the first time, Jiang Shangyu had a very clear understanding of this word. There was no sound in the dark domain. Jiang Shangyu's eyes became more and more cautious, slowly scanning everything in the domain. The lightning caused severe damage to the entire domain. Everything in the domain disappeared, and the domain itself was fragmented. Countless darkness slowly surged along Jiang Shangyu's body. Jiang Shangyu's aura became a little weaker, and the domain gradually formed a hole again. Haven't you found it yet? Li Tianlan's voice sounded again. It seemed to be far away, but also seemed to be close at hand. Jiang Shangyu's heart kept sinking, and his body was stretched to the limit. What are you looking for? Haven't you found it yet? The corner of his mouth twitched, and he laughed at himself in his heart. He even wanted to laugh. Everything in front of him seemed to be a joke. He was omniscient and omnipotent in his own domain, but in his own domain he couldn't find his opponent. Li Tianlan must be in the domain. But Jiang Shangyu couldn't find him. What was this? Why was it like this? How did he do it? This was even more of a blow to his confidence than when Jiang Shangyu found out Li Tianlan's true state. After all, the extremely twisted sword light was at the level of swordsmanship. Jiang Shangyu never thought that the domain must be worse than swordsmanship. Li Tianlan's swordsmanship could reach that level, and he believed that the domain could too, but he hadn't found the way to that level yet. But now Li Tianlan was in the domain, but he was out of his perception. The psychological impact on Jiang Shangyu was completely different from before. This was equivalent to Li Tianlan suppressing Jiang Shangyu's advantage in what he was best at. How was this possible? Crackle, crackle. The faint sound of the electric current was still ringing in the domain, and the extremely huge destructive power would not dissipate for a while. The pain spread from every part of his body to his brain. Because of the absolute tension, Jiang Shangyu's body affected the wound, and his shirt had been completely dyed red with blood. Crackle. In the faint sound he stared at the faint electric light in front of him, which seemed to dissipate at any time. Here. Without warning, a palm appeared on Jiang Shangyu's shoulder. A huge force came down from above and pressed Jiang Shangyu's body down in an instant. The moment Jiang Shangyu, whose face changed dramatically, knelt on one knee, a domineering and fierce leg swept toward his head. The dragon's roar echoed fiercely, right beside his ears. Without any room to react, Jiang Shangyu held his head with both hands and rolled to the side in a very embarrassing posture on the ground. The darkness surged, and Jiang Shangyu was 20 meters away in an instant. He turned around and stared in the direction of the attack just now. The darkness there was quiet and stable, and there was nothing strange. Where is he? Jiang Shangyu's eyes narrowed tightly. The dark domain covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace. He could almost see every corner and every detail in the domain. He could even see the ants carrying some breadcrumbs 400 or 500 meters away. But he just couldn't see Li Tianlan. His figure spun quickly in his domain. In all directions. No. No Li Tianlan. Two arms stretched out silently from behind him, and instantly wrapped around his neck. Jiang Shangyu, whose aura was fluctuating violently, did not hesitate and burst out all the power in his body in an instant. In an instant, There seemed to be a black sun rising in the domain. The black sunlight was completely boiling, evaporating everything in the domain. Jiang Shangyu gasped rapidly, and his heart became more and more flustered. The moment the arms wrapped around his neck, he fought back completely out of instinct. When the black sunlight swept everything around, Jiang Shangyu could clearly feel the arms wrapped around his neck, but he could only feel the other party's arms. At that time, there was no one behind him. This was not an illusion. There was really no one. Jiang Shangyu didn't know what was going on at all. The domain that he was proud of was completely used by Li Tianlan. In his omnipotent domain, he could see through everything. But when it came to Li Tianlan, he was like a blind man. The light suddenly lit up in the darkness for a moment. The dazzling sword light appeared directly in front of Jiang Shangyu without any warning. The sound of clothes being torn and blood flying at the same time. The sword light shredded his shirt and left a long gash on his chest. Jiang Shangyu's face was livid. It wasn't an expression of extreme anger. Instead, it was more like an expression of extreme shock. Traces of black light surged from afar. It gradually covered his whole body from head to toe. Jiang Shangyu's body seemed to be covered with a layer of black gauze. Bang! The sound of the crazy vibration of the joints was like a dragon's roar. A fist that seemed to be able to penetrate everything also appeared on his back without any warning. There was no sound of the wind when the fist was waved, only the majestic and incredible power. It seemed to be a sudden burst of strength at a close distance. The hard knuckles smashed on Jiang Shangyu's back. There was a loud noise in his whole body, as if his internal organs were crazy. Vibration. The gauze composed of black silk threads suddenly twisted and offset most of the power. But Jiang Shangyu's figure flew out nearly 20 meters under this punch, and a mouthful of warm blood sprayed directly from his mouth. Before the blood fell to the ground, the sword light appeared from behind again and slashed at his neck. There was no time to straighten up. Jiang Shangyu rolled on the ground desperately. His breathing became more and more rapid, his face gradually pale, and the surrounding domain began to become unstable. You look like a wild dog that has been beaten and can't fight back. In the silent darkness, Li Tianlan's voice rang in his ear. The corner of Jiang Shangyu's mouth twitched. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "I am a human." "Oh," Li Tianlan said faintly. Jiang Shangyu turned his body and looked around. He was silent for a long time before he gritted his teeth and asked, "Where the hell are you?" This was definitely not a question that he should ask. But he asked it. This was definitely not a question that Li Tianlan would answer. But Li Tianlan also gave the answer. "Look back," he said. Chapter 984. Looking back, Jiang Shangyu didn't look back. The moment he heard Li Tianlan's voice, he rushed straight ahead. There was no attack behind him. The dark domain that enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace was churning and shrinking wildly. The starlight and the night reappeared. The huge domain shrank to 100 meters in less than a breath, and then shrank again. 50 meters, 30 meters, 15 meters. Li Tianlan inexplicably felt a trace of familiarity. Everyone who saw this scene felt that it was very familiar, but also very strange. The domain, which had shrunk to 15 meters, had become completely substantial. The darkness formed the strongest wall, and countless glimmers flickered on the dark wall. Jiang Shangyu stood in the center of the dark wall, with an indestructible momentum. This was the unique skill of the Jiang family of South America. 30-meter mortal world. Before Jiang Shangyu appeared, it was known as the strongest domain in the dark world, and its defense was the best in the world. But this was also Jiang Shangyu's unique skill. The limit of 30-meter mortal world was only 30 meters. It was known that there was nothing to fear within 30 meters, but Jiang Shangyu exceeded the limit and shrank the domain by half again. When the domain was condensed to this extent, the defense was not simply doubled. The dark wall was completely condensed. Standing in the darkness, Jiang Shangyu appeared in front of all the spectators for the first time. In countless corners of Emperor Dong's palace, the representatives of different forces were watching this scene quietly. When the domain spread to the entire Emperor Dong's palace, they could only see darkness and the occasional sword light in the darkness. At this moment, It could be said that Jiang Shangyu appeared in people's sight for the first time. It's going to end. In the office on the 5th floor of Emperor Dong's palace, Saint Li Shi and Situ Tsangyue, the 3 deputy palace masters, stood side by side and watched Jiang Shangyu appear from the darkness. Saint said lightly. Li Shi did not speak. Situ Tsangyue nodded and said yes. The most tricky thing about Jiang Shangyu was his domain. For the time being, no one had a deep understanding of the domain beyond the peak of the invincible realm, which was also the biggest variable. But at this time, Jiang Shangyu completely shrank the domain, which meant that he gave up his biggest advantage and became defensive. He defended in front of Li Tianlan. This was a complete joke. In the center of the dark wall, Jiang Shangyu's body had been tensed to the limit. He couldn't find Li Tianlan, nor would he believe Li Tianlan's nonsense. The only thing he could do was to shrink his domain to the extreme. Within a range of 15 meters, there was no space for Li Tianlan to hide at all, and the extremely condensed domain was not something that Li Tianlan could break at will. He had tested out Li Tianlan's true state, and the purpose of the challenge had been achieved. At this point, he could already retreat to Beihai. Countless eyes were focused on Jiang Shangyu. It was quiet inside and outside the domain. In front of him was an extremely solid wall, and outside the wall was the night sky and starry sky of Emperor Dong's palace. There was no Li Tianlan. A drop of cold sweat flowed down Jiang Shangyu's forehead, and there was only astonishment left in his heart. How could there be none? What is he hiding? Where is it? Jiang Shangyu cautiously moved his body. Everything was normal inside and outside the domain. He was the only one there. But he was sure that Li Tianlan was nearby, somewhere he couldn't see. Since he couldn't see Li Tianlan, he naturally didn't dare to retreat. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. The tall walls surrounding him stood before him, solid, deep, and heavy. That was his ultimate defense in his current state. Li Tianlan might be able to break the domain by force, but he definitely couldn't do it in a short time. His expression calmed down little by little. He was safe in the domain. Li Tianlan couldn't break his domain, which meant that he could force his way out of Emperor Dong's palace. Just like Li Tianlan couldn't see through his domain before, so he chose not to look at it. He couldn't find Li Tianlan's position now, so he wouldn't look for it. Without any hesitation, the domain, which had shrunk to a range of 15 meters, shook violently. Jiang Shangyu's body rose into the air, and was about to rush into the distance. He didn't care about the so-called face. He didn't have much expectation for this challenge. Now that he had confirmed Li Tianlan's current state, it was a worthwhile trip. Tonight, the dark world might laugh at him, but after dawn, everyone would shut up. His feet left the ground, and the domain was shaking. His speed instantly increased to the limit. Sprint. Jiang Shangyu's body had already risen into the air, but he didn't rush out. He felt a sharp pain in his scalp. The moment his feet left the ground, a hand directly reached out from behind him and grabbed his hair. Because the speed was too fast, this grab almost scratched off his scalp. Jiang Shangyu gave a muffled groan, and didn't react for a while. "Why don't you look back?" In the faint voice, the attacks fell like a storm in an instant. The whole Emperor Dong's palace fell into a dead silence the moment Li Tianlan's voice sounded. The Heroes Club, the Men in Black, the Shadow Throne, all the representatives of the forces stared at the scene in front of them, as if they were completely petrified. All the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace looked incredulous, as if they had seen a ghost. Jiang Shangyu didn't see anything. He was only suffering attacks, continuous attacks. But his figure appeared in everyone's sight, so everyone saw Jiang Shangyu and Li Tianlan. In the luxurious bedroom, Horsewoman stood beside Qin Weibai with a puzzled look. She subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai and asked, "How did he do it?" "I don't know," Qin Weibai said quickly. She frowned tightly and stared at Jiang Shangyu, who was being attacked crazily. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a touch of confusion and worry. She didn't know what Li Tianlan's state meant. At least in the stories she had read and heard, Dongqing Huangtu didn't seem to have this kind of martial arts. Everything seemed to have changed at this moment. Li Tianlan, Dongqing Huangtu. Different times. The parallel lines that were parallel to each other, and finally intersected seemed to fly in different directions again after a short intersection. Why is this happening? Qin Weibai murmured to herself and shook her head hard. Is this still martial arts? Saint stared at the battlefield. The battlefield was getting farther and farther away. Jiang Shangyu wanted to run. The moment Li Tianlan's attack broke out, the two moved crazily. The domain within 15 meters. Li Tianlan had been in the domain all the time. Li Tianlan couldn't break this domain in a short time. And Jiang Shangyu, who was in an extreme defensive posture, couldn't cancel this domain in a short time. The area of 15 meters had become a domain where death and danger coexisted. The unique skill that once belonged to the Li family broke out without reservation. In close combat, Li Tianlan was not afraid of anyone at all. Jiang Shangyu didn't even have a chance to look back. He could only hide. Without looking back, he just ran forward crazily. He ran out of Emperor Dong's palace and rushed into the old city area of Xianyuan City, which was being renovated. The two figures gradually disappeared from sight. Saint suddenly turned back, looked at Situ Songyue, and said seriously, "What is this?" Li Shi was also looking at Situ Songyue. In their minds, in the whole dark world, apart from Li Tianlan, it seemed that only Situ Songyue could answer this question. I don't know. Situ Songyue recalled the scenes just now. Li Tianlan was in the domain. But when Jiang Shangyu appeared, not only Jiang Shangyu, but also all of them didn't see Li Tianlan in the space of 15 meters. Situ Songyue smiled bitterly and whispered, I think apart from Tianlan, only my brother can answer this question. Boom. A loud noise suddenly came from the distant night. An abandoned low-rise building waiting to be demolished completely collapsed under the huge force. Smoke and dust flew all over the sky. Jiang Shangyu's body fell from the ruins with the broken building at the same time. Puff. Blood spurted out of his mouth. He knelt on one knee on the ground and coughed violently. Why don't you look back? Li Tianlan asked again. The voice was right in his ear. Jiang Shangyu suddenly turned back. The domain was still there. But there was nothing behind him. Jiang Shangyu felt cold all over. There was nothing behind him. Except for his shadow. The distant starlight and light converged, outlining his shadow on the ground. The shadow was very faint. Jiang Shangyu knelt on the ground and lowered his head. His shadow was standing, maintaining a posture of waving a fist. Jiang Shangyu looked confused. He hesitated and said in a hoarse voice, What is this? How did you do it? Li Tianlan's voice came from his shadow. His voice was also confused. I don't know. Chapter 985. The dilapidated building collapsed completely, and countless pieces fell to the ground. In the smoke and dust, Jiang Shangyu dodged the falling heavy objects. He stood where he was and was silent for a long time. His shadow moved with him, always maintaining an offensive posture. All kinds of emotions swirled in his mind, getting stronger and stronger. Some were absurd, some were frightened, and some were confused. All the emotions reached their limits in the shortest time. Jiang Shangyu gasped and opened his mouth. He seemed to want to laugh, but after a ha, his whole body froze there. He was omniscient and omnipotent in his domain. He shrank his domain to maintain defense, but he couldn't find Li Tianlan. The answer was simple and absurd. Li Tianlan was now in his shadow. Almost all the people watching the battle in Emperor Dong's palace saw this scene, but no one could understand what was going on. The moment Jiang Shangyu's feet left the ground, the shadow behind him moved directly to his side, reached out, and grabbed his hair. Then it was attack, 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 attack. They fought out of Emperor Dong's palace and into the old city. Smoke and dust flew, the building collapsed, and the stones flew. From beginning to end, people couldn't see Li Tianlan. Jiang Shangyu seemed to be playing boxing with his shadow, or to be beaten unilaterally by the shadow. He had no power to fight back. Li Tianlan became Jiang Shangyu's shadow. In this state he could ignore any attack at all, because all the attacks couldn't hit him. The living person walked into the shadows of others. Did Li Tianlan become someone else's shadow? Or existed in someone else's shadow? If it was the former, how did he do it? If it was the latter, then from the perspective of physics and biology, What kind of way did he exist? At present, there seemed to be no way to explain this matter. At least for the time being, science couldn't explain it, nor could martial arts. Merging into the opponent's shadow from the domain. This time was very short, but it seemed to break some incomprehensible definitions. But for now, neither Li Tianlan nor Jiang Shangyu understood what it meant. Jiang Shangyu looked at his shadow silently. He didn't move. Li Tianlan in the shadow was also motionless. Everything seemed to have an answer. Jiang Shangyu gradually narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. You can't attack? The shadow didn't speak. But Jiang Shangyu directly confirmed this. This kind of combat style of directly entering the opponent's shadow could no longer be described as strange. It was completely impossible to guard against. In this state, Li Tianlan was truly invincible. Invincible was not an adjective, but a real state. He could attack unscrupulously, but he was not afraid of any form of attack. At the very least, he was not afraid of any physical attack. Nobody can hurt him. Then he could kill anyone. If this was a unique skill without any restrictions, Jiang Shangyu knew very well that he would not be able to live until now. With Li Tianlan's strength, he could not even survive a minute in front of Li Tianlan in this state. Obviously, this kind of unique skill had great limitations. Jiang Shangyu calmed down completely. He recalled the scenes he had just experienced, and his eyes kept flickering. This kind of unique skill might be unlimited, but Li Tianlan obviously hadn't found the right way to use it. The level of the attack he had just endured was far lower than Li Tianlan's normal attack intensity, and the attack rhythm was very slow. It seemed that Li Tianlan needed to constantly adjust every time he made a move, but it was unknown what this adjustment would cost him. I can't attack? In the shadow, Li Tianlan's playful voice sounded. To be exact, what you need is time. Jiang Shangyu looked extremely embarrassed, but his voice became calm again. So, the last thing you should give me is time. Under the dim light, some of the dim shadows suddenly flared up. Jiang Shangyu's shadow instantly left his body. Jiang Shangyu did not move, but the shadow began to dive directly. One after another, incomparably illusory sword energy and invisible matter stabbed Jiang Shangyu silently. Compared with just now, Li Tianlan's attack seemed to be a little stronger, but the frequency was a little slower. Boom! The ruins on the ground were completely lifted up by the surging sword energy. Countless steel bars and stones were swept into the sky and turned into pieces. Jiang Shangyu's figure retreated quickly, and the domain around him was dissipating quickly. The completely illusory shadow seemed to have substance at this moment. After a short pause, the shadow directly punched. Li Tianlan's current state was extremely strange. He himself couldn't tell what was going on, but he could roughly understand his situation at this time. He appeared in Jiang Shangyu's shadow, and his every move consumed many times more physical strength than under normal circumstances. In this case, his body was completely illusory, which was equivalent to a real invincible realm state. But the power and frequency of his attacks were greatly limited to the combat capability of the invincible realm. If he wanted to break through this level of power, he didn't need to pay a heavy price. But once the power and frequency of his attacks exceeded this limit, he would directly come out of the shadow. Just as he told Lin Fengting in the desert, his path was unorthodox. He could use his existing system, martial arts, and the Li family's invincible manual to make his body reach the most balanced state, so that he could speed up his attack frequency countless times with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and thus exert the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm. But his realm had been stuck here, and he had not really broken through and entered the invincible realm. The combat capability of the invincible realm was his current upper limit, and also the limit of the power he could exert after merging into someone else's shadow. He couldn't achieve balance in the shadow at all, at least not now. If he was now at the peak of the invincible realm, or even really beyond the peak of the invincible realm, then even in Jiang Shangyu's shadow, his strength was still a super expert beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Jiang Shangyu couldn't hold on for a few seconds in his hands. But now the upper limit of his combat capability of the invincible realm. If he wanted to keep up with Jiang Shangyu's speed, he could only let Jiang Shangyu's shadow move by itself. This also consumed Li Tianlan's physical strength, and the power he could exert was further reduced. The most realistic situation was that all his attacks could not really break the defense of Jiang Shangyu, who was focused on defense. What he needed was a chance to completely master the rhythm and turn the illusion into reality, so as to hit Jiang Shangyu hard. Jiang Shangyu kept retreating, and his eyes were fixed on the shadow that followed him like a shadow. The countless illusory dragon shadows brought by the dragon fist rushed in front of him, and then slowly dissipated in the darkness. Wisps of obscure darkness kept penetrating his shadow. Even in this state, Jiang Shangyu still did not forget to fight back. Li Tianlan was indeed invincible now. But Jiang Shangyu didn't believe that there was really an invincible realm immune to all attacks. He was still trying to find a way to deal with Li Tianlan's wonderful state. The shadow followed him like a shadow. The two sides attacked and defended, and the rhythm was getting faster and faster. Jiang Shangyu kept trying, in different ways. All his counterattacks were in vain, but he never gave up, and the rhythm was the same. However, in the old city area that had been out of the sight of all the spectators, no one noticed that although Jiang Shangyu's counterattack rhythm remained the same, his body, which was constantly retreating, was getting tighter and tighter. Li Tianlan was waiting for an opportunity. Coincidentally, Jiang Shangyu was also waiting for an opportunity. Chapter 986. It was like the top psychological game. Whether it was Li Tianlan or Jiang Shangyu, both of them were silently waiting for an opportunity. It was difficult for Li Tianlan in the shadow state to break Jiang Shangyu's defense. Jiang Shangyu, who had calmed down, was now clear about this. Both sides needed an opportunity. Li Tianlan needed to find a perfect opportunity to break out of the shadow and kill Jiang Shangyu with one blow. At the same time, the moment of breaking out of the shadow was also an opportunity for Jiang Shangyu to hurt Li Tianlan. Crack! In the clear cracking sound, Jiang Shangyu finally released the small-scale domain that he had condensed to the limit. The thick and obscure darkness spread wildly. Half of the old district of Xianyuan City became dark in an instant. After getting out of the small-scale domain, Jiang Shangyu's dodging speed instantly accelerated. After all, the domain was his home field. In the dark, his every move could be said to be like a fish in water. Retreat, dodge. At this moment, Jiang Shangyu seemed to be integrated with the darkness. In the darkness, his figure was like a black flowing light, appearing 100 meters away in the blink of an eye. Like a shadow. In the loud bang, an excavator parked on the construction site flew up the moment Jiang Shangyu's feet landed on the ground. The extremely fierce fist wind brushed past Jiang Shangyu's ear and hit the excavator. The huge force exploded in all directions. The engine, the oil pump, and even the tracks flew out at the same time and disintegrated in the air. The crane arm flew in the air, and the excavator was completely deformed. In the loud roar, the oil tank exploded in the violent collision. The fire rose into the sky. Jiang Shangyu rushed into a nearby construction site with his shadow in the shining fire. It was like a hurricane passing through. The whole construction site became fragmented in an instant. Steel bars, supports, wood oil drums, components, everything in the construction site was completely blown up and deformed in an instant, as if two monsters were chasing and rushing through the construction site. The shadow was still moving. The power and pure sword light completely broke out in each style of dragon fist, and it seemed to attack Jiang Shangyu's vital parts tirelessly. The explosion sounded nearby, and the fire spread to the construction site. It went all the way along the overturned oil drums, and the fire rose into the sky. The sound of fire trucks had been heard in the distance, and the battle was still spreading in the direction of the old district. Resolute, decisive, fierce, and crazy. The moment the fire spread, the mixing station near the construction site collapsed with a roar, and countless pieces of cement and concrete poured down wildly. Jiang Shangyu rushed through the messy construction site and rushed into the nearby abandoned building. The shadow of the blue dragon flashed in the whole building in the next second, and the dragon's roar was earth-shattering. Countless blue electric arcs raged in the empty building. The whole building seemed to be buried with a bomb inside. The electric arcs burst, and smoke and dust flew. The 7-story building seemed to have experienced countless explosions inside, and the whole staircase suddenly became ruins. The shadow and Jiang Shangyu were entangled in a frenzy. Attack, 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 attack. Li Tianlan was nowhere to be seen. Only shadows could be seen. The dark shadow seemed to have gone completely mad. The sudden burst of attacks turned the shadow into a mirage. Every part of the shadow was attacking. Its limbs were maintaining a high frequency of crazy attacks. It was an indescribable madness, silent and determined. Every movement of the shadow was clearly conveying a bloody and cruel concept. Kill, kill, kill. Countless punches and kicks fell in front of Jiang Shangyu almost at the same time. A dark shadow surrounded Jiang Shangyu. It seemed illusory, but when the punches and kicks hit it, there were countless dull roars. No stop. Without any pause, Li Tianlan in the shadow clung to Jiang Shangyu. There was a violent wind, heavy rain and thunder. The shadow of the dragon surrounded by the blue electric light crazily moved and rose. Every joint of the body was shaking, and the dragon's roar was extremely loud. The dragon's fist, which kept changing, hit the dark shadow in front of Jiang Shangyu without any hesitation. Retreat, rush forward, attack, and punch. The shadow that protected Jiang Shangyu became thinner and thinner at a speed visible to the naked eye. Li Tianlan, who was releasing his physical strength to his heart's content, moved faster and faster. He and Jiang Shangyu kept a close distance of less than 1 meter. In addition to the shadow, there were only endless flashing electric arcs between them. The shadow dimmed and then condensed again. The coverage of the dark realm was obviously less. Boom, boom, boom. Countless punches and kicks hit it hard. The darkness in the realm surged faster and faster. The shadow, which had dimmed to the lowest point, became clearer and clearer. It became solid again and completely wrapped Jiang Shangyu in it. The coverage of the realm was still shrinking. Attack, destroy, repair. The corners of Jiang Shangyu's mouth rose slightly, with some mockery. In this state, Li Tianlan might be very terrible in the future. But now his new discovery or new breakthrough was not perfect, so there was nothing to be afraid of at all. The point was, after tonight, would Li Tianlan still have a future? The realm stopped shrinking. The shadow around Jiang Shangyu instantly condensed again, and was unbreakable. At that moment, all the dragon's roar disappeared completely. Without any warning, the moment the shadow stopped, Li Tianlan's aura plummeted. A faint blue electric arc that was extremely weak, but wildly twisted was directly pressed by Li Tianlan on the shadow in front of Jiang Shangyu. His figure suddenly rushed out of the shadow and stood in front of Jiang Shangyu. Fuck! Humph! Jiang Shangyu, whose face changed dramatically, cursed. Li Tianlan also snorted with an ugly face. At the closest distance, the faint blue electric arc in Li Tianlan's hand was pressed directly on Jiang Shangyu's face, almost against the shadow. The electric arc, which looked extremely weak and small, flickered gently, dreamy and beautiful. It gently deformed and seemed to be extremely slow. But in fact, because of the high degree of distortion, it had exceeded the speed visible to the naked eye. A fatal danger suddenly broke out. It was as if countless experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were standing on his face and attacking without reservation. The electric arc, which twisted thousands of times in a second, burst out in an extremely violent way. There was only thunder in the darkness. The boundless, ocean-like lightning covered every corner of the place. The roar was earth-shattering. The dark shadow in front of Jiang Shangyu, which had recovered to its solid state, was completely torn into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The majestic and unimaginable power and sword energy completely surrounded Jiang Shangyu at the closest distance. A rain of blood flew. Jiang Shangyu roared and retreated crazily. But the endless thunderbolts had already covered every area nearby. Wherever he went, he was being attacked by endless experts of the thunder-shocking realm. Blood stained his body as he roared. It was completely out of instinct. He kept retreating, just wanting to stay away from Li Tianlan. Almost at the same time as the thunder broke out, Li Tianlan also noticed the difference in the surrounding domain. In the domain filled with darkness, black silk threads appeared one after another. Strands of black silk formed an impenetrable net. The black silk was extremely soft, but also extremely sharp. All the lines crisscrossed, completely sealing off the surroundings. The thunder spread and spread in the domain. The black silk threads were also madly intertwining and increasing. The moment the thunder broke Jiang Shangyu's defense, the dense black silk threads suddenly tightened and shrouded Li Tianlan. It was endless, densely packed. Faint blue electric arc dark silk threads. Both sides broke out at the same time. The whole domain was completely boiling. Li Tianlan's body was tense, and the dazzling sword light was emitted from almost every pore on his body. The sword intent was mighty, and the sword energy rose to the sky. Layer after layer of black threads came down without any hesitation. The sword energy and the black silk threads collided wildly. It was the entanglement of light and darkness, but Li Tianlan heard countless sounds of metal colliding. Saber light and sword shadow. The sound of countless weapons colliding filled the whole world in an instant. Li Tianlan's breath stagnated. In an instant, blood came out of his eyes, ears, nostrils, and mouth. His 7 orifices were bleeding. The black silk thread suppressed the sword light in an instant, and countless lines fell on Li Tianlan's body. At this moment, Jiang Shangyu was surrounded by endless thunder, and Li Tianlan was wrapped by countless black lines. The sword light, the black silk, and the same blood kept splashing on the two of them. It was hard to say whether it was because of their tacit understanding, or because their fighting consciousness was at the same level. At the most unlikely point of time, the two of them made almost the same choice. When the crazy explosion in the shadow was about to shatter the barrier around Jiang Shangyu shrank the domain, and began to repair the barrier in front of him. Li Tianlan always maintained his own attacking rhythm. That was destined to be the most uneasy moment for Jiang Shangyu. He shrank the domain in order to fight back with all his strength. But during the whole process, Li Tianlan never made a move. He let Jiang Shangyu repair the barrier in front of him. The moment the repair was completed, it was also the moment when Jiang Shangyu subconsciously relaxed. Li Tianlan directly rushed out of the shadow. The opportunity flashed away. Perhaps in less than half a second, Li Tianlan attacked with all his strength, regardless of everything. Jiang Shangyu might have expected this, but the time was too short. He was a little slower, and he also fought back with all his strength the moment Li Tianlan revealed his real body. So the black silk threads and thunder all over the sky burst out at the same time. Jiang Shangyu was seriously injured, and Li Tianlan was also seriously injured. The harsh sound of weapons rubbing against each other echoed wildly in his ears. Blood flowed down from his body, and Li Tianlan's will was completely hit. In the dark domain he seemed to be the only light source. Endless sword light spread out around him, getting brighter and brighter. The two sides had been far away from Emperor Dong's palace, and no one in Emperor Dong's palace could see the scene here. But even from a long distance, the experts in Emperor Dong's palace could still feel the power that was constantly spreading in the distance. The thick white mist completely wrapped Li Tianlan's body. Light. There was only the purest light left around him, hot, pure, and surging like a raging fire. In the sky above the old city of Xianyuan City, with Li Tianlan as the center, waves of visible shock waves were constantly spreading. The light around Li Tianlan had been extremely bright, dispelling the darkness. He seemed to have become a sun. The thunder all over the domain merged with every ray of light, and the powerful destructive power impacted every corner of the domain. Li Tianlan took a step forward. His bare feet stepped on the ground, a little cold, but extremely stable. Boom! The light was monstrous, and the endless surging sword light burst out like countless torrents. The thick darkness was squeezed together, twisted, deformed, and shattered. In the deafening sound, Jiang Shangyu's domain, which surpassed the peak of the invincible realm, was completely torn apart by the endless sword light, leaving nothing. The light disappeared. But there was a thick fog in the old city late at night. The vast white fog completely enveloped Li Tianlan, and also blocked the sight of others. A large amount of vitality in the white fog poured into Li Tianlan's body. The wounds in his body began to heal quickly, and the bleeding stopped quickly. Cough! In the heart-wrenching cough, Jiang Shangyu coughed up blood and struggled to stand up. The white fog kept repairing Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan squinted at Jiang Shangyu. The vast white fog merged with him as the center, and his aura kept rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. To Li Tianlan's surprise, Jiang Shangyu's aura also began to rise from the bottom. It seemed that a considerable part of the terrifying attack just now did not hit him. Li Tianlan frowned. To be exact, when all the attacks hit Jiang Shangyu, some of them were diverted. Diverted? You're pretty good, but your strength is just SOSO. Li Tianlan's voice was cold. Jiang Shangyu was not the strongest of all the experts he had ever met, but he could definitely be said to be one of the strongest opponents he had ever met. The key was that this kind of opponent with all kinds of tricks was hard to fathom. Even now, Li Tianlan did not see through all his trump cards. Just SOO. Jiang Shangyu chuckled. Their auras rose at the same time. Li Tianlan's recovery speed was countless times faster than Jiang Shangyu's. But Jiang Shangyu seemed to have diverted part of the damage, and his overall recovery speed was not much slower than Li Tianlan's. Can you still enter my shadow? Jiang Shangyu twisted his neck and said lightly. Want to try? Li Tianlan's tone was cold. Yes. Jiang Shangyu looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously. How about letting me try again if you can? Li Tianlan fell silent. Enter Jiang Shangyu's shadow again? He didn't know how he did it just now. Now he got out of the shadow and wanted to merge with the other party's shadow. Li Tianlan couldn't do it at all. Even Li Tianlan couldn't replicate the fusion just now. He needed to think and meditate. A road had appeared vaguely in front of him again. After the end of martial arts, the road was vague and extremely vague. Li Tianlan still needed a long time to explore before he could continue to try. He could clearly feel the feeling at that moment. From the moment he entered Jiang Shangyu's shadow, his originally perfect martial arts had become imperfect. This was not a bad thing, because this imperfection was not a defect in his current martial arts. But a new road seemed to appear after the perfect martial arts, and the end of martial arts that he once saw. Li Tianlan didn't know how long the road was. Maybe it was just a step and a half, but no matter how long it was, the road always existed. His whole world seemed to have changed a little because of the moment of shuttling just now. I should try something else. Li Tianlan's fingers moved slightly. Is there anything else you can let me try? Jiang Shangyu sneered. Li Tianlan also laughed. His smile wasn't arrogant or haughty, but there was a hint of pity in it. Did you misunderstand something? Li Tianlan said softly. I haven't seen a domain-type figure who has broken through the peak of the invincible realm, so I'm just playing with you. Don't take it seriously. After all. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly blew through Xianyuan City under the night sky. The wind whistled, and it was as sharp as a sword. Emperor Dong's palace was the starting point of the wind. The moment the wind sounded, the fierce wind had swept through the entire Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan's subsequent voice was extremely clear in the wind. I haven't used a sword yet. Above the night sky, the whole sky was shimmering. Colorful rays of light gradually converged from afar, creating a colorful scene. Jiang Shangyu seemed to think of something bad. His face became extremely ugly, and his facial features even became distorted in an instant. This sword again, he murmured to himself, and then without hesitation, he turned around and left. The memories in his mind became clearer and clearer like nightmares. Jiang Shangyu's heart was cold. His speed was getting faster and faster. In fact, he had already been psychologically prepared for Li Tianlan to go to this step, so he took Li Guangtu with him. But in this situation, in the state of ruthless, even if Li Guangtu came, it would be useless. Li Tianlan now had the destructive power beyond the peak of the invincible realm with his bare hands. That weak electric arc directly blew up his domain. If ruthless was added, Jiang Shangyu wouldn't even have the slightest idea. His figure quickly rose into the air, crossed the construction site in an instant, and rushed to the courtyard. Li Tianlan stood where he was, looking at his back, motionless and expressionless. The shimmer in the air had completely enveloped Xianyuan City, and the colorful light wandered in the air bit by bit. Wisps of sword intent surged out of Li Tianlan's body, and merged with every colorful light in the air. Jiang Shangyu flew farther and farther. Li Tianlan stretched out his palm. A sword sound suddenly rang out in Emperor Dong's palace. Before the sword sound came out of Emperor Dong's palace, ruthless, burning with colorful sword energy, had already appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The horrible sword energy and energy perfectly merged and swept the city in an instant. The night sky and the sky surged and trembled violently. Li Tianlan stood where he was. At this moment, he seemed to be completely integrated with Ruthless. The energy of Ruthless was sword energy, and his sword energy became energy. An indescribable power spread out wildly with Li Tianlan as the center. The air in front of him, the sky above, and everything in sight seemed to be constantly twisting and deforming. Li Tianlan raised Ruthless in his hand. His voice rang through the world in an instant. As far as my eyes can see, Jiang Shangyu's body suddenly paused in the air. Bang! It seemed that endless darkness suddenly surged out from Jiang Shangyu's side. A wall that was completely condensed from darkness appeared beside Jiang Shangyu. Forcibly condensing the ultimate domain consumed a lot of physical strength and willpower. Jiang Shangyu's body was bleeding wildly. Li Tianlan's voice came from a distance and shook the night sky. It was simply deafening and extremely majestic. Forbid! The spreading energy rushed to the domain with Li Tianlan's voice. The colorful light rushed to the front of the domain. The strongest defense condensed to the limit. The small-scale domain that even Jiang Shangyu himself could not eliminate in a short time disappeared directly the moment it touched the light. It did not collapse, nor did it dissipate. The thick and hard domain seemed to disappear completely without any sign, or even a chance to react. Perhaps most people could not understand this scene. But Jiang Shangyu was obviously prepared for this, or he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The moment the domain disappeared, his figure suddenly flickered and appeared directly 100 meters away. Jiang Shangyu's figure kept flashing. Before the colorful light wrapped around him, he directly rushed out of Xianyuan City. Li Tianlan held Ruthless in his hand and narrowed his eyes in silence for a moment. Everyone in Xianyuan City could feel the great power roaring in the air. All the experts above the thunder-shocking realm could feel the incredible burning and consumption of Ruthless energy. The hesitation did not last for a second. The colorful lines in the air suddenly disappeared. Li Tianlan did not finish this sentence. The moment Jiang Shangyu escaped from Xianyuan City, he put away the Ruthless in his hand. The body of the Ruthless sword became much dimmer in a short moment. The sword body quickly disintegrated and became the sword formation of the 13-story building again. Countless famous swords slowly rotated around Li Tianlan and finally disappeared. The night sky was restored to peace. The darkness outside Xianyuan City surged. Jiang Shangyu's figure jumped from the darkness to a barren mountain area outside the city. As soon as his body landed, he staggered and suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. Beads of blood rolled down from all over his body, and countless wounds healed quickly. Jiang Shangyu's body trembled, and his expression was distorted. But the moment he landed on the ground, he suddenly laughed. He took out his cell phone with trembling hands and dialed a number. The phone was quickly answered. Li Guangtu's somewhat cold voice came over. "How is it? I lost and ran away. Ha 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 ha. Are you happy?" Li Guangtu remained calm. "Happy, of course I'm happy." Jiang Shangyu's laughter was a little crazy. "I've confirmed Li Tianlan's state and Ruthless state. The extreme state of the chosen one we discussed does exist. Although Li Tianlan has not reached the real limit, it has already taken shape. But it's a pity. Ruthless energy is running out. I let Li Tianlan use that sword move. In Ruthless' current state, Li Tianlan has at most one more sword move. Against him or against me. He's dead, ha 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 ha." He crushed a button on his shirt and poured the powder from the button into his mouth. His body swayed as he walked forward. In the distance, he stopped. In the distance, there was an armed helicopter of the Freedom Corps. "You can come to Beihai." Li Guangtu's voice was calm and indifferent. "How's the situation?" Jiang Shangyu gasped a few times and asked directly. "It's going well so far. Our time is limited, so we have to speed up." "Okay." Jiang Shangyu nodded. "See you in Beihai." "See you in Beihai." The phone was hung up. Jiang Shangyu took a deep breath and strode to the helicopter. The moment the night quieted down, even Li Tianlan felt a little tired and weak. The vast white mist continuously drilled into his body. The wounds on his body healed quickly, and his aura became stable again in a very short time. Even though he was now confident that he was invincible, he had to admit that Jiang Shangyu was a very difficult opponent, especially when he didn't know the other party's martial arts. It was the first time he fought with Jiang Shangyu with his bare hands. It was not easy to defeat the other party without paying any price. If it hadn't been for the inspiration at that subtle moment, today's battle was doomed to not end so easily. Jiang Shangyu fled in a panic. Li Tianlan still stood where he was, recalling the scenes of the battle. He had successfully entered Jiang Shangyu's shadow. But even now, he didn't know how he had done all of this. At that moment, he suppressed his strength to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, concentrated all his strength in one point, and concentrated his willpower like never before. At that moment, he locked on to Jiang Shangyu's position in the Rain of Swords. Out of his almost instinctive fighting consciousness, he wanted to quickly get close to Jiang Shangyu. Under the circumstances at that time, there was only one unique skill that could be the most convenient to do this. That was the shadow formula that tribulation had given him. But he didn't know why he failed to place his shadow in front of Jiang Shangyu because of the interference of the domain, but he succeeded in changing his position with the shadow that he failed to place. At that time, the sky full of thunder and the dark domain completely distorted the space. When Li Tianlan appeared beside Jiang Shangyu, he was already in his shadow. Li Tianlan's brows furrowed tightly. There seemed to be no clue in his mind, but the more he thought about some of the details, the more confused he became. The road to the end of martial arts had appeared in front of him, but there seemed to be a heavy barrier between him and it. Li Tianlan couldn't see the way to go on that road for the time being. Thunder, darkness, shadow, space, all the scenes were replayed in his mind, bit by bit, again and again. He simply sat down on the ground, holding Wu Qing, frowning, and his whole person was as quiet as a statue. The sound of hurried footsteps could be heard nearby. Li Tianlan raised his head and glanced. Saint and military counselor rushed over first. Then came Situ Songyue with Qin Weibai's. Tianlan. Seeing Li Tianlan sitting on the ground, Qin Weibai's face suddenly changed. "I'm fine." Li Tianlan shook his head and stood up. "I'm just thinking about something." The white mist became thin and transparent little by little. Qin Weibai came to Li Tianlan and touched the wounds on his body. All the wounds had begun to heal, but Li Tianlan, who was covered in blood, still looked a little shocking. "It's good that you're fine." She raised her palm and touched Li Tianlan's face. Li Tianlan smiled and pinched her nose. "Your Majesty, something happened in Beihai." Military counselor's voice sounded. It was a little inappropriate, but it was extremely necessary. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. "Why didn't Wang Shengxiao contact me? Half an hour ago, all the communication signals in Beihai were cut off. Our intelligence personnel hiding in Beihai have lost contact with us. Beihai is very skilled in this aspect, but with Chen Fengqing's approval, they are fully prepared. It will take at least half an hour to restore the communication. At present, no one knows the specific situation in Beihai, but combined with all the signs, we can almost be sure that the final battle in Beihai has begun." Half an hour ago, Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and sneered. "They are really good at finding time." Half an hour ago, Jiang Shangyu appeared in Emperor Dong's palace. Obviously, all this was planned. He glanced at Saint and Situ Songyue. They should have set off for East Island yesterday, but due to all kinds of considerations, Li Tianlan asked them to stay and watch the final battle. A domain-type superior who surpassed the peak of the invincible realm was also the enemy of Emperor Dong's palace. As deputy palace masters, it was necessary for them to have a certain understanding of the opponent. But in this battle, they could not see much. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. "Your Majesty, let's set off for East Island right away." Saint's tone was calm. Although he and Situ Songyue were not in East Island, the power of Emperor Dong's palace in East Island was already extremely strong. The new nightmare troop had set off under the leadership of Lin Yuxian and Li Beitian. Su Chu and Du Hanin had taken the first batch of elites to East Island a few days earlier. Now, East Island only lacked 2 superiors of the invincible realm. "Okay." Li Tianlan nodded and said after a moment of silence, "Be careful." Saint and Situt Sungyue looked at each other, turned around, and left in a hurry. Li Tianlan looked at their backs and thought of his martial arts and the final battle in Beihai. He felt a little regretful. It seemed that the path after the end of martial arts could only be studied after tonight. Let's go back. I'll go to Beihai. Li Tianlan said slowly. Qin Weibai slightly tightened her grip. Qin Weibai held Li Tianlan's hand and whispered, "That's what we should be most careful about. Jiang Shangyu may not have lost his fighting ability. And Li Kuangtu, don't underestimate them." "Don't worry." Li Tianlan patted her hand and said faintly, "Wuqing will go with me." On this trip to Beihai he wanted to meet not only Jiang Shangyu and Li Kuangtu, but also Wu You, whom Lin Fengting mentioned, and even Wang Tianzong. Li Tianlan took a deep breath, and was about to say something. Wuqing, who was in his arms, suddenly shook. Almost at the same time, Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai turned their heads and looked to the north. At the end of their sight was a white mist that was gradually dispersing. Apart from that, there was nothing. Li Tianlan gave Qin Weibai a strange look. Qin Weibai was also looking in that direction. Her eyes were a little confused. "What did you see?" Li Tianlan asked. "I don't know." Qin Weibai shook her head blankly. "It's an instinctive reaction. I just wanted to take a look." Li Tianlan looked at Wuqing in his arms. Wuqing was quiet and did not respond at all. Li Tianlan looked in that direction again, and his fingers moved slightly. A colorful light floated out of Wuqing's sword, which merged with the sword energy in Li Tianlan's hand and quickly swept through that area. There was nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head and didn't think too much. "Let's go." The white mist surged slightly. Li Tianlan took a step forward with Qin Weibai in his arms. The figures of two people and one sword quickly disappeared. The mist drifted in the darkness and gradually became thin. In the direction where Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai's eyes met, in the thin white mist that was almost disappearing, a sound of retching suddenly sounded. In the messy ruins, a young man, who looked less than 30 years old and was dressed very neatly, struggled to stand up in the mess. As soon as he stood up, he bent down again and retched, but nothing came out. F***CK, the young man adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with a painful look on his face. "I told you that you should take medicine for seasickness. This is too exciting. EW. An extremely broad hand fell on the young man's back and patted him gently. The young man reached out his hand. A large bottle of pure water fell into his hand. He managed to stand up straight, unscrewed the water bottle and washed his face. The water dripped on the ground. The white mist around him seemed to be slowly surging toward him. The young man touched the cool water in his hand and washed his face hard. He seemed to be a little sober. He put the water to his mouth and gulped down more than half of the bottle. Then he took a long breath and narrowed his eyes with some enjoyment. The young man was not tall, just over 1.7 meters. He was a little fat, with a round face and a pair of glasses. He looked extremely simple and gentle. His appearance could not be regarded as handsome, but it was extremely clean. He belonged to the type that made people feel more comfortable the more they looked at him. Holding the water bottle in his hand, the young fat man looked at everything around him comfortably. After a long time he sighed softly and said, "The place of my dream is finally here." "Your Highness, this is..." Beside the young man stood a sturdy figure at least more than 2 meters tall. Compared with the fat man, he was like a giant. "That's right. My father passed through here." The young fat man's eyes had some very simple and beautiful emotions. "This time he can let me come back. I'm afraid my brothers will envy me to death." He seemed to think of something and reached out with his tiptoes. The giant bent down sensibly and let the fat man pat his shoulder. The fat man laughed and said, "When you go out, boys should learn to protect themselves. You should call me young master in the future." "Yes, Your Highness, young master." The giant nodded with a serious face. The fat man drank water again and took a few steps forward. "It smells good." Muttering to himself, he whispered a sentence. The giant sniffed and said in a muffled voice, "Young master, what's the smell?" His voice was low, like muffled thunder. The young fat man laughed and said, "The smell of fate." He moved forward slowly and stopped in a certain place for a moment. He didn't know if it was a coincidence, but the place where he stopped was the place where Li Tianlan rushed out of Jiang Shangyu's shadow. The fat man stood in place and was silent for a while. Then he shook his head and sighed. What a terrible madman. 9,000-word chapter. Chapter 987. He took a shower and changed his clothes as soon as possible. When he walked out of the bedroom, Li Tianlan looked no different from before the battle. More and more news came from all sides. Outside the castle, the roar of the helicopter was endless, bringing a gust of wind. The representatives of the superpowers in the dark world, who came to watch the battle, symbolically cared about Li Tianlan's state, and then left in a hurry. The battle was over, so Li Tianlan didn't have the nature to keep them for dinner. Everyone was sensible and left immediately. There was no formal airport in Tiannan. With Li Tianlan's return to Tiannan, the military airport, which had been built more than a year ago but had been blocked by all sides, could not be put into use until at least next winter. Therefore, all the representatives came by helicopter. After leaving Xianyuan City, some of them would go to Annan City, some would go to Nanyuan to take a plane or a fighter jet back to the headquarters, or go directly to Beihai. Li Tianlan put on a gorgeous black windbreaker that was completely unfolded. When Li Tianlan straightened his collar and walked out with Qin Weibai, military counselor just hung up the phone outside the door. Did Saint Anant sit to leave? Li Tianlan asked casually. The helicopter just took off 3 minutes ago. Military counselor nodded. Tiannan was very far from East Island, and the final battle in Beihai broke out suddenly. The helicopter the two Invincible Realm experts took would fly to Ningzhou at full speed. From Ningzhou Air Force Base, they would take a fighter jet to Dongshan Guqin Island, and then take off to East Island. If everything went well, it would take about 3 hours. The situation in Dongshan was complicated. Although the Prince Group had a traditional advantage in Dongshan, the Southeast Group was not weak. As for Guqin Island, it was the place where Bai Qingqian was in power many years ago. Zhou Yuanshan also served as the mayor of Guqin Island a few years ago, so his influence was deep-rooted. With the face of the Dongqing clan, it would not be a problem to arrange a private plane. Li Tianlan nodded and walked down the stairs. The military counselor's voice sounded unhurriedly, clear and steady. I just received a call from Freedom Corps Commander Ning. An armed helicopter of the Freedom Corps left the designated area of the Corps without permission during training. The pilot turned off the positioning system. The Freedom Corps forcibly restored the positioning 15 minutes ago. The position shown by the helicopter has already bypassed Ningdian from the direction of Xianyuan City and entered Nanyuan Province. Li Tianlan stopped and said, Is it to pick up Jiang Shangyu? Very likely. Military counselor nodded. Jiang Shangyu's plan is very clear. He doesn't expect to win this battle at all. In the bet with him, a lot of money comes from the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Raining School, and even Knights Templars. However, he is very confident in self-protection. He has arranged for a helicopter in advance. After the battle, he will take the helicopter to escape. At this time, it is estimated that the other party will soon arrive at the Nanyuan base. His next step will definitely be to Beihai. Military counselor paused and continued. Based on our current analysis and speculation, Jiang Shangyu has many purposes for challenging your majesty. First of all, he wants to attract the attention of the dark world to Tiannan, so as to complete the final arrangement in Beihai. Second, he wants to test his majesty's state and confirm his real combat capability, so as to carry out effective targeted actions. Finally, Jiang Shangyu may want to consume Xianyuanfeng's energy. From the looks of it, his plan has been executed very successfully. Your Majesty, you must be more careful during this trip to the North Sea. With Jiang Shangyu's domain, Li Kuangtu's sword, and the cooperation of several Invincible Realm experts, the situation is very complicated. He quickly glanced at Qin Weibai beside Li Tianlan. Seeing that she didn't say anything, he continued. The only good news is that we have successfully made contact with Flaming Fire. Flaming Fire set off a few hours ago through the passage of Wulan State. He will arrive at Beihai a little later than your Majesty. Under the soft light, Qin Weibai's expression did not change at all. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Flaming fire? Queen of Darkness, full moon song. Military counselor said softly. I haven't seen her for a long time. Li Tianlan didn't know what to think. He shook his head slightly and pressed the button for the elevator. The helicopter has been arranged. Your Majesty can take off at any time. Military counselor followed Li Tianlan meticulously. The three of them walked out of the elevator. Li Tianlan shook his head slightly. No, I'll go directly to Ningzhou. It's faster. Go directly? Without the helicopter? Military counselor was stunned and hesitated. Xian Yuanfeng's energy? It's okay. Li Tianlan smiled, looked at Qin Weibai beside him, and said softly, wait for me to come back. Be careful. Qin Weibai tidied Li Tianlan's collar and said softly. Li Tianlan said yes. A sword light lit up in front of the castle of Xianyuan City. The sword light went straight into the sky and appeared in the distance in the blink of an eye. The dazzling beam of light shrank toward the sky. The sword light flashed again and disappeared completely in the night sky. Qin Weibai raised her head and looked at the night sky silently, without saying a word. Military counselor's voice was interrupted by another voice as soon as it rang out. Hey. What the hell, he left? Why did he leave just like that? It's so fast, too fast, too fast. Military counselor turned his head with a stunned look. In his sight, two different figures walked over from the night sky. An honest-looking young fat man who looked a little happy trotted to military counselor. He seemed to be afraid that military counselor would misunderstand, so he stood at a safe distance. Beside him, a burly giant at least 2 meters tall followed him. The two stopped less than 5 meters away from military counselor. They raised their heads at the same time, and silently looked in the direction where Li Tianlan left. Tut! The fat man sighed. It's not a good start. Really? The military counselor looked a little confused, but his body tensed up secretly, and he was a little vigilant. He didn't know the fat man in front of him, but he was sure that he was not from Emperor Dong's palace, because the giant beside him was not from Emperor Dong's palace. With an exaggerated height of nearly 2-3 meters, such a person could bring a great sense of oppression to people even if he didn't know martial arts. If there was such a person in Emperor Dong's palace, military counselor would have an impression. Similarly, he would not be the representative of the superpowers who came to watch the battle. He was not from Emperor Dong's palace, nor was he the representative of the superpowers. Such a person appeared in the core area of Emperor Dong's palace, under the sight of countless guards. Military counselor raised his vigilance in his heart, but he didn't take the initiative to attack. From him, he only felt curiosity and no malice. Who are they? Perhaps because the fat man's appearance was easy to make people feel good, military counselor's voice was extremely calm. The fat man was stunned. He seemed to be focused on chasing Li Tianlan, so he didn't notice military counselor and heard his question. Who were they? The fat man glanced awkwardly at the giant beside him. The giant silently lowered his head and looked at him silently. That. The fat man thought for a moment. We. He looked at military counselor, smiled awkwardly and said carefully, we are guests, right? Military counselor didn't figure out the circuit of the fat man's mind for a while, and was speechless. At this time, the fat man's expression and attitude combined with the content of his words seemed to have a natural sense of humor. Even Qin Weibai was amused. Military counselor was a little speechless. Those who enter the door are guests, of course, you can be regarded as guests. But fat man, how did you get in? The fat man's face suddenly wrinkled, looking like a frowning bun. Fat man. He looked down at his figure. I'm not fat, am I? The giant beside him nodded hard, seeming to agree. Military counselor was a little confused. He strangely had no desire to attack these two people of unknown origin, but he didn't want to accompany them to talk nonsense here, especially at this crucial time. He looked down at the time, and was about to speak when Qin Weibai's cold and calm voice sounded. Get to the point. Who are you? What are you doing here? What's your purpose? The fat man, who was looking down at his belly with a sad face, looked up. He seemed to see Qin Weibai, and his eyes lit up slightly. In the hazy night, Qin Weibai stood there in a light-colored dress. She was cold, quiet, dreamy, and ethereal. Her eyes had a soul-stirring charm to it. The fat man's eyes were a little dazed. It was not the eyes of dementia, nor did it contain very disgusting lust. Instead, it was a kind of innocence and joy as if seeing perfection. I suddenly want to write a poem, Fatty mumbled to himself. His eyes gradually regained their clarity and he smiled. His smile was very serious. Sister-in-law, you're one of the most beautiful ladies I've ever seen. Only my mother can compare with you. Qin Weibai had heard countless compliments, so she did not care about it. What she cared about was the word that the other person had unintentionally said. It was a term that modern people could never come into contact with, but they had definitely heard of it. Empress Mother. Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes. What kind of name was that? It's Mother. He looked at Qin Weibai seriously. His gaze changed as if he had some doubts. He said softly, Strange, there's a shadow of order on you. Qin Weibai quietly watched him talk nonsense without batting an eyelid. Fatty muttered something to himself, and then seemed too lazy to think about it. He just gave a thumbs up and flattered without any limits. Sister-in-law is indeed a goddess. I'm not sister-in-law. Qin Weibai's voice was a little cold. Of course you are. Fatty was very thick-skinned. He smiled and pointed to the place where Li Tianlan had just disappeared. The one who just left is my elder brother. That's my sister-in-law. Elder brother? Qin Weibai laughed. Do you know him? I don't know him yet, but I will soon. Inexplicable, Qin Weibai shook her head. What's your purpose? The question was simple and direct, and there was almost no room for evasion. Fatty scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. This question is a little complicated. My father. My father. He seemed to feel that the title was a little awkward, so he paused again and smiled. My father asked me to come here to build a good relationship with my elder brother. In fact, I'm here to find a job. Qin Weibai and military counselor looked at each other. In the past 2 years, countless masters had joined Emperor Dong's palace, but most of them were in the probation period. Almost none of them could really win their trust. It seemed that this was the first time they had heard someone say that joining Emperor Dong's palace was to find a job. It was a little strange. Military counselor glanced at the giant who made him feel a little uncomfortable, and then looked at the harmless fat man in front of him. He said lightly, What's your realm? Realm? Fatty stared blankly, and the giant looked confused as well. Thundershocking realm? Or fire-flaming realm? Military counselor asked again. Oh. Fatty kept nodding. No, I don't have any realm. I never fight. I used to be a nurse and now I'm a doctor. I'm self-taught. Doctor. When it came to the profession of doctor, Fatty's face was full of color, with a very clear touch of pride. You can even call me a biologist. I'm a real talent. Sister-in-law, I'm needed here, and my elder brother will also need me. Male nurse doctor, biologist, military counselor's mouth kept twitching. He looked at the giant beside Fatty and asked, What about him? Fatty was a little embarrassed. He's not good at anything. He'll run errands with me for the time being. If there's a chance he can be a fitness coach, a PE teacher, or something. Well, he's good at basketball. Casually, Fatty arranged for the frightening-looking giant. Or you can let him be a security guard at the entrance. He'll be absolutely loyal to his duty. There's no problem with his size. There's no problem. Military counselor took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Do you have any certificates that can prove your professional abilities? Do security guards need certificates? Fatty was dumbfounded. I mean, a doctor's certificate. Saint clenched his teeth and said word by word. Well, no, Fatty murmured, but my ability is very good. I'm absolutely professional. What are you good at? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Ergonomics, genetics, and genetics. Fatty's answer was without hesitation. I've also been a battlefield doctor for a period of time. I'm very proficient in internal and external medicine. Fatty's eyebrows danced as he blew his own trumpet. What's your name? Qin Weibai glanced at the giant and asked slowly. The giant looked down at his young master. When he was about to say something, Fatty waved his hand and patted the belly of the giant beside him. Yixing Tian. The giant's body shook, but he didn't say anything. My name is Xianyuan Wushang, Fatty said with a smile. But I prefer the name my mother gave me. Sister-in-law, you can call me Changsheng. Ji Changsheng. Xianyuan Wushang, Ji Changsheng. Qin Weibai frowned and asked subconsciously. Why is your surname Xianyuan? Fatty looked at Qin Weibai dully. After a while he said weakly. Because my father's surname is Xianyuan. Chapter 988. The sword light slowly converged at an Air Force base in a border city in Ningzhou province. The fighter plane was parked dozens of meters away, and the tower had completed the route planning. The commander of Ningzhou Corps was waiting next to the fighter plane in person. When he saw Li Tianlan appear from the converging sword light, he immediately trotted over, saluted Li Tianlan, and called him Your Majesty with a friendly expression. This major general came from the Border Control Corps and had served as a middle-level officer of the Thunderbolt Battalion. Later, he left the Border Control Corps because of a relapse of his injuries on the battlefield. With the personal intervention of Shi Hanbing, a direct subordinate of Dongqing Wudi, he had a meteoric rise after leaving the Border Control Corps. 2 years ago, he was promoted to the rank of Major General and came to Suzhou. Now he could be regarded as the backbone of the giant group. Commander Lu, thank you. Li Tianlan took the initiative to shake hands with him and said in a calm voice. It's nothing. It's just a piece of cake. Commander Lu was not good at talking. He let go of Li Tianlan's hand and pointed to the fighter plane immediately. Your Majesty, shall we go now? Okay. Li Tianlan looked at the time and did not hesitate. Commander Lu led the way to the two-seater fighter plane nearby. With the route specially approved by the Army headquarters, Your Majesty, we will arrive at Qingdao in about an hour and 20 minutes. Qingdao is ready. The fighter plane model there is more advanced. It will take about 50 minutes to arrive at the military airport in Qiushui city of Beihai. Li Tianlan nodded. Before he spoke, his cell phone suddenly rang. Li Tianlan stopped, took out his cell phone and glanced at it. It was a video call from Wang Shengxiao. Beihai has forcibly restored the communication with the outside world. Li Tianlan pressed the answer button and looked at Wang Shengxiao on the screen without speaking. Wang Shengxiao also did not speak for a while. He looked a little haggard, but his aura was more stable and indifferent. The final battle has begun. After taking a deep look at Li Tianlan, Wang Shengxiao said in a low voice, I'm in Ningzhou. I'll board the plane right away. How's the situation? Li Tianlan asked directly. Overall, it's not out of control, but it's not too good either. Wang Shengxiao shook his head in response. Around an hour ago, all of the other cities in the North Sea were attacked at the same time. We've already taken out a group of infiltrators, but there are still many infiltrators who have re-entered the North Sea. The North Sea Legion bases in all of the cities were the first to bear the brunt of the attack, followed by the city governments, police departments, headquarters of the sword-wielding families, and transportation hubs in all of the cities. All of our communications were forcibly cut off some time ago, and we're still out of contact with Qiushui City. The invaders have taken over almost everything in Qiushui City, so we're in a rather passive situation. His voice was a little hoarse. The decisive battle in the North Sea was unavoidable. Wang Shengxiao was mentally prepared and had enough confidence to win. But having confidence was one thing, and seeing the situation in front of him was another. After all, this was his Beihai. Even if he won the decisive battle this time, the losses of Beihai could not be ignored. The lives of soldiers, the loss of talents, and the uneasiness of ordinary people could all be said to be Wang Shengxiao's responsibility. Shenzhou is fine? Li Tianlan's eyes flickered. They dare not come to the Shenzhou for the time being, but their ultimate goal must be the Shenzhou. Mount Dibing is here. From the perspective of defense, the power of the Shenzhou is the strongest, and also the hardest bone to bite. So they will cause chaos in several other cities. The more people I send to rescue, the weaker the power of the Shenzhou will be. When the Shengzhou is weakened to a certain extent, it will be the beginning of their general attack. Wang Shengxiao said slowly. So, what's your decision? Li Tianlan was expressionless. Rescue. Wang Shengxiao answered without hesitation. The All Heavens Forces and the Internal Defense Forces have gone to various cities in batches. I'm the Patriarch of the North Sea. I can't watch the cities in North Sea go out of control. Even if I know what they're thinking, I can't do nothing. Otherwise, even if the decisive battle is won, it will be meaningless. He looked at Li Tianlan and said in a calm tone, so I need your support. As long as you stay in Mount Dibing, I can send most of the forces on Mount Dibing to stabilize the situation. The experts of the Invincible Realm didn't show up, and even the experts of the half-step Invincible Realm didn't do much. These high-end forces must be used in Mount Dibing. If you stay in Mount Dibing, you will be our biggest guarantee. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said faintly, the biggest guarantee of Mount Dibing should not be me. Wang Shengxiao's eyes flashed, but he didn't speak. How is your father? Li Tianlan asked directly. This was a question that had almost been ignored by the dark world. But this was the question that Li Tianlan was most concerned about now. The decisive battle in Beihai might be extremely dangerous and huge for others. But at present, it was certain that with the start of the decisive battle in Beihai, an earthquake that was bigger than the chaos in Snow Country more than 2 years ago had completely formed in the dark world. Beihai Province and East Island were the first to bear the brunt. But this storm also swept through Wulan State and Snow Country. The relationship between Wang Xiaoyao and Snow Country, the relationship between Li Tianlan and Wulan State, and the relationship between Wulan State and Snow Country would all be tested. In Northern Europe, with the departure of Flaming Fire, the conflict between the Dark Knights and the Holy Land was destined to break out tonight. The Jiang family of America also began to stir up trouble. Although Lin Fengting was now in America, it was impossible for him to keep the whole of America calm by himself. Inside Zhongzhou State, Qin Fangqing also kept moving. Europe, America, Snow Country, Zhongzhou State, East Island, Beihai. At this point, it was no longer lively but completely chaotic and messy. No one knew what the dark world would be like after tonight. As far as Li Tianlan was concerned, he was not afraid of Jiang Shangyu, let alone Li Guangtu. Of course he would be careful, but he would not be timid. Now in the whole dark world, the only thing that could make him worry was Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong, who was ignored by the dark world. Wang Shengxiao's face changed slightly, and his heart suddenly became a little subtle. Li Tianlan's voice was flat. Vaguely, his peers on the screen, even those who were a few years younger than him, had put him on the same level as Wang Tianzong. How is your father? It was a simple greeting, but with an indescribable condescension. Donghuang. His Majesty Donghuang. Wang Shengxiao felt a little bitter in his heart. He was silent for a long time, and then said blandly, I don't know. This was the truth, but it was not the whole truth. He really didn't know what Wang Tianzong's current state was, but it didn't mean anything else. Li Tianlan said, Oh, when can you get to Mount Dibing? Wang Shengxiao changed the subject. I will get to Beihai soon, Li Tianlan said blandly. But before Mount Dibing, I need to get something from Beihai, something that belongs to me. He looked at the screen with meaningful eyes. Wang Shengxiao seemed to think of something, but he didn't show any uneasiness. He just nodded and said, Got it. Li Tianlan smiled and hung up the phone. He didn't know if Wang Shengxiao really didn't know Wang Tianzong's state at this time. But it didn't matter, as long as he knew. At his current level, he might not be able to see how powerful that supreme realm was. But unlike Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu who were at the same level, Li Tianlan had seen the end of martial arts a long time ago, and he also had ruthlessness. Therefore, he could simulate the power of Xianyuanfeng and the 13-story building in their heyday, and he could roughly simulate Wang Tianzong's endurance at that time. Therefore, he could be sure that Wang Tianzong's injury could not be cured in a short time, but it was also impossible that he had no ability to fight at all. In the final battle of Beihai, Li Tianlan could cooperate with Beihai, but before Wang Tianzong took action, he would not take any action. The Jiang family of South America, Sanctuary, Purgatory of Heaven Capital, Jifeng Sword Training School, Wuji Palace. These were the comprehensive strength, which could be regarded as the top strength in the current dark world. If they were buried in Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace would have cleared all obstacles in the dark world. It was hard for Li Tianlan to do that himself. It was also hard for Wang Tianzong to do that. But when he was with Wang Tianzong, he could do it. When the final battle of Beihai ended, Wang Tianzong also overdrew the power he had accumulated for more than 2 years. Emperor Dong's palace was the only one left in the dark world. Li Tianlan reached out and pinched his collar. The black collar with golden patterns engraved on it rubbed Li Tianlan's face intimately. He stepped onto the fighter plane and said calmly, "Let's go." For now, it didn't seem to matter what the surname of the fat man's father was. What mattered was the fat man's own ability. From a nurse to a doctor to a biologist. If Xianyuan Wushang was not bragging, and he was really good at ergonomics, genetics, then he was indeed a talent that Emperor Dong's palace needed very much. The development of countries in the world in these fields was far from mature. Even the Wang family of Beihai, which was the strongest in this field, could only be said to be relatively advanced in terms of ideas and technology. All the forces and countries, including the Wang family of Beihai, were just getting started in this field. If Xianyuan Wushang was an expert in this field, then not only Emperor Dong's palace, but all the forces would welcome him. It was not difficult to verify Xianyuan Wushang's professional ability. Although she did not know the origins of Xianyuan Wushang and Xingtian, Qin Weibai did not want to miss out on talents. She took Xianyuan Wushang into the small conference room on the second floor of the castle. At the same time, she called the silver-eyed Nailan Shuriying, who was doing experiments in the underground laboratory. This core figure of the Wang family of Beihai had been in Emperor Dong's palace for more than 2 years. Except for regularly going to the headquarters of the Lin clan to record some data, she basically did not leave Emperor Dong's palace. Although Nailan Shuriying was young, her professional ability was recognized by the world. In terms of the technology and development progress of that year, Nailan Shuriying could be said to be the top expert in the field of ergonomics, genetics. Xianyuan Wushang's origin was a little strange and inexplicable. Qin Weibai always felt that he was not as simple as he appeared to be, but she could not feel any malice from him. She wanted Nailan Shuriying to test Xianyuan Wushang's quality. If he really had some real talent, she might as well take him in first. After all, in this field, even if they had Nailan Shuriying, there was still a big gap between them and the Wang family of Beihai. So there was a live interview in the small conference room. Both Qin Weibai and Nailan Shuriying felt that this matter was very simple. Nailan Shuriying, who had a cold temperament, was not good at talking. She just casually wrote down a few formulas. The formulas were not simple, but they were not very esoteric either. They were in line with the level of ordinary researchers in Nailan Shuriying's mind. Xianyuan Wushang silently watched Nailan Shuriying write the questions. His eyes were calm, indifferent, and calm. This kind of indescribable gaze made Nailan Shuriying angry. This fat man, who had been fawning over Qin Weibai when she came, looked at her in an extremely strange way. Nailan Shuriying could not describe that kind of feeling. There was no so-called amazement or appreciation. That kind of calmness was like a kind of careless indifference. It was like a person walking on the road seeing an ant under his foot, giving people a feeling that he was completely ignored. Nailan Shuriying was a little annoyed. She simply wrote down a formula that she had solved not long ago, and then handed it to Xianyuan Wushang with a cold face. Military counselor watched quietly. Qin Weibai watched quietly. Nailan Shuriying watched quietly. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Xianyuan Wushang. Xingtian, who was as tall and burly as a wall, suddenly glanced at Nailan Shuriying. He had a high-energy warning expression on his face, and there was a touch of indescribable strangeness in his eyes. The fat man, who was holding a large bottle of purified water, took Nailan Shuriying's question and glanced at it. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. That's it. At this moment, there seemed to be some very subtle changes in his body. Casually picking up the ballpoint pen beside him, the fat man held the pen with his somewhat thick fingers and quickly drew under the formulas. Countless symbols were arranged under the nib of his pen. Casual, helpless, and careless. There was no pause or thinking at all. 20 seconds later, the piece of paper handed to him by Nalan Shuriying had been full of various symbols. Take a look. Xianyuan Wushang put down the pen and handed the paper in his hand to Nalan Shuriying. Nalan Shuriying subconsciously took it. Her slender arms were trembling slightly, and even she herself was not aware of it. She took the paper handed over by the other party, looked at the answers on it, and frowned subconsciously. Time passed little by little. Nalan Shuriying's breathing gradually became rapid. She hurriedly glanced at the answers again, and then suddenly raised her head and looked at Xianyuan Wushang with a look of disbelief. Huh. Xianyuan Wushang seemed a little surprised. I thought you would say that my answer was wrong. It seems that you are very smart. It's not wrong. Nalan Shuriying stared blankly at Xianyuan Wushang. After a full minute, she shook her head absent-mindedly. How did you do it? At first glance, the other party's understanding of the formulas was indeed somewhat strange, but this strangeness came from the limitations of thinking. The other party's answer was correct, but the way he solved it was completely different. It was a way of thinking that could not be imitated. It was simple, incisive, and clear at a glance. The answer given by the other party was undoubtedly correct, but the way he solved the problem almost directly subverted Nalan Shuriying's thinking. Their original way of solving the problem seemed incomparably clumsy and ridiculous in the other party's way of thinking. For formulas, the fat man gave the optimal solution in 20 seconds. It was the optimal solution that even Nalan Shuriying could not achieve. This sounded like a fantasy story, but it had happened so magically. Is there any problem? Qin Weibai glanced at Nalan Shuriying. Nalan Shuriying was a little hesitant and shook her head subconsciously. The other party's way of thinking was extremely magical, but a few formulas could not explain his level. But what was certain was that he was absolutely qualified to work in the laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace. Nalan Shuriying thought for a moment and said softly, "If possible, I hope he can join my laboratory and become my main assistant." Qin Weibai opened her eyes wide in surprise. Nalan Shuriying suddenly felt a little nervous. She glanced at Xianyuan Wushang and avoided his eyes. "Can I?" Xianyuan Wushang smiled and shook his head. "Emperor Dong's palace is not short of researchers. I just want to be a doctor." He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. After a few seconds, he smiled and said, "I heard that His Majesty Dong Huang wants to build a hospital in Emperor Dong's palace. If possible, I hope to work in this hospital." He picked up a pen again, wrote a set of formulas on the paper, and handed them to Nalan Shuriying. "Of course, if you have time, you can also come to me. We can communicate with each other." Nalan Shuriying took the formula from his hand and looked at it for a while. Her body suddenly trembled, and because she was too excited, an extremely obvious flush appeared on her face. The other party's formula was not a question, but a kind of somewhat general answer. What made Nalan Shuriying feel a little ashamed was that she couldn't even understand this formula for a while. She could only be sure that this formula was a model in the field of genes, which should be related to the deep repair of the human body. If this formula is true, it means... Nalan Shuriying bit her lip hard, and her whole mind was instantly immersed in this formula. "I found the direction," she suddenly said. "What?" Qin Weibai was a little stunned. "I found the direction of the third generation of eternal life, a very key direction." Nalan Shuriying's voice was a little trembling. There can also be new progress in the situation of the Lin clan headquarters, and Miss Dongqing, His Highness Situ, this formula. Bang! In the loud sound, military counselor, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. He stared at Xianyuan Wushang in front of him. "Can you save the boss?" "The boss?" Xianyuan Wushang's chubby face had a blank but polite smile. He touched the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose again. The light shone on the lenses, shining with colorful light. This seemed to be a very common action. But behind the mirror that Qin Weibai and others could not see, countless torrents of data were flashing wildly on the lenses. The smile on Xianyuan Wushang's face gradually froze, and then he became a little embarrassed. He didn't find any information about the so-called boss. The formula he gave was a gift to Emperor Dong's palace to show his sincerity. So the formula was not given casually. The moment he touched his eyes, he had already invaded the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace. The new city plan of Emperor Dong's palace in the future was clear at a glance from the Li family's Tree of Life plan. He found some interesting information in the biological laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace, which was the detailed physical data of several wounded people and the recent changes in their physical data. It was also a problem that he thought would be difficult for them to solve in 10 or 20 years. The formula he gave based on the situation of several people was very targeted, so he was very satisfied with this gift. But the boss, Xianyuan Wushang, touched his eyes again. A huge amount of data flashed wildly, and all the documents in the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace were turned out by him in an instant. He coughed and said a little embarrassedly, "Well, who is the boss?" Qin Weibai glanced at Nalan Shuriying. Nalan Shuriying suddenly came to her senses. She hurriedly said, "Wait a minute." Then she left the conference room and rushed into the elevator. The elevator went all the way down. After a short pause, it went up again. The sound of high-heeled shoes hitting the ground was getting closer and closer. Nalan Shuriying came in with 2 folders. The folders recorded all the physical data of the master of Samsara Palace in the past 6 months. She put the folders in front of Xianyuan Wushang and said sincerely, "This is the information of the wounded people." Xianyuan Wushang took the files and carefully observed the data on them. The light of the gold-rimmed glasses flickered slightly, and all the data was quickly imprinted on the lenses as he turned them. A large amount of data merged with each other and constantly outlined on the lenses. Finally, a slender and tall figure of a woman appeared. Xianyuan Wushang frowned slightly and looked up at Qin Weibai with a little astonishment in his eyes. Qin Weibai's heart suddenly sank, but she didn't show it on the surface. The figure that only Xianyuan Wushang could see on the lenses quickly dissipated. The data that belonged to Xianyuan Wushang once again easily entered the database of Emperor Dong's palace and the computer in the laboratory. After confirming all the body data, he watched Nalan Shuriying's flight records in the past 6 months. There was no distance in the internet. The data that belonged to Xianyuan Wushang flowed freely in the internet world, bypassing the secret databases of many countries. The next second, in the laboratory of the Lin clan's headquarters in Europe, a large amount of data began to roll on the computer, and all the cameras were turned on. In the conference room of the headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace, the reflection of the figure lying in the foam-like nutrient solution and the perfect, pale, bloodless face was reflected on the lenses of the gold-rimmed glasses. All the data merged perfectly. Xianyuan Wushang's body suddenly shook. He looked at Qin Weibai, who was forcing herself to be calm, and his eyes were a little complicated. He muttered to himself, "What's going on? 2 sisters-in-law. Exactly the same?" He gradually frowned and looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai looked at him silently. There was a short silence. "Who the hell are you?" The 2 of them asked in unison. "I'm a doctor." Xianyuan Wushang spread his hands. "Maybe I can be regarded as a low-level hacker, but mainly I'm a doctor." He knocked on the documents on the table, looked at Qin Weibai, and asked, "Sister-in-law, what about you?" Qin Weibai was silent for a while and slowly said, "What did you see?" "That." Xianyuan Wushang narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. "I just compared the data and entered the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace by the way. I found the file of wounded number 1. And then I followed her flight records to invade the network system of a manor and saw another sister-in-law." "You can invade the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace?" Qin Weibai didn't know what kind of tone she was using. Emperor Dong's palace had been established for a short time, but it didn't mean that the level of Emperor Dong's palace was not good. As the world's most powerful financial institution, the Flourishing Age Fund had all kinds of talents. The data firewall of Emperor Dong's palace was set up by dozens of top talents. It might be possible that it could be invaded, but how could it not even send out the intrusion alarm? And it seemed that at that moment he not only invaded the database of Emperor Dong's palace, but also the headquarters of the Lin clan. "I'm also a hacker, but I'm still a doctor," Xianyuan Wushang said seriously. "So what's going on? Why are there two of you? As you can see, Qin Weibai was silent for a while. I am her and she is me. Time travel? Parallel universe? Overlapping dimensions? Xianyuan Wushang frowned. I don't know. Qin Weibai shook her head. She suddenly felt a little strange. Xianyuan Wushang's reaction seemed a little strange, but she couldn't tell what was strange. It's very strange, he murmured to himself. His words were fast and messy, and Qin Weibai found it difficult to listen. Big boss, boring, crazy order. So the shadow of order in you should come from the other sister-in-law? Or the other you? Xianyuan Wushang said softly. It was order again. When they first met not long ago, he said that Qin Weibai had the shadow of order. Qin Weibai's tone was calm. She looked at Xianyuan Wushang seriously. What is the order you mentioned? Xianyuan Wushang looked at Qin Weibai quietly for a long time. After a long time he chuckled. It's probably what we understand. Order is order. For example, the order of a country, laws, rules, order, system, food, housing, and transportation are all orders. The simplest explanation is, he took a deep look at Qin Weibai. Omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. That's order. He gently knocked on the information in front of him. The other sister-in-law is in a very strange state. She can't be said to be alive, but she's not completely dead. I'm sure I can wake her up, but not now. Not only her, but also the other two patients. Believe me, it's not a bad thing to keep them asleep for a short time. Of course, we can improve their current physical conditions little by little. Xing Tianxia, who had been silent, subconsciously glanced at Xianyuan Wushang. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time, and then said softly, You said your father asked you to build a good relationship with Tianlan? Where is your father? Where are you from? Xianyuan Wushang was stunned. His glasses flickered, and he quickly glanced at the map of Zhongzhou province that appeared on the glasses. My father is a little busy. His business is very big, and I'm afraid I won't see him in a short time. In a short time again. Xing Tianxia glanced at him again. Xianyuan Wushang continued with a smile. I'm from the Central Plains, Zhongyuan province, with the compound surname Xianyuan. Qin Weibai had decided to do a thorough investigation. She thought silently and glanced at military counselor. Military counselor nodded and reached out his hand to Xianyuan Wushang. Then, welcome to Emperor Dong's palace. It's my honor. Xianyuan Wushang narrowed his eyes with a smile. You'll work in the biological laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace from now on. As for this one, no. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. I'm a doctor, and I still choose to be a doctor. It's my favorite profession. Military counselor was stunned and didn't speak. I'll find a way to treat the 3 special patients. Xianyuan Wushang smiled. Okay. Qin Weibai nodded. But the hospital of Emperor Dong's palace doesn't have much room for you to perform. If you don't mind, how about being a battlefield doctor? Xianyuan Wushang blinked and looked at Qin Weibai innocently. Go to East Island. Qin Weibai smiled. Go now. Trust me, it's the best place for you. He glanced at military counselor. Military counselor nodded. I'll arrange it right away. You too follow me. Qin Weibai smiled. Most of the elites of Emperor Dong's palace are in East Island now. I hope you two can do your best to ensure our survival. Have a safe trip. The helicopter roared and left Emperor Dong's palace, flying further and further away. In the spacious cabin, Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tianxia sat opposite each other, staring at each other. After an unknown period of time, Xianyuan Wushang smiled and said, We were sent away just like that. That little sister-in-law is very smart, but she still doesn't trust us enough. She must have already sent people to investigate our origins. She can't find anything, Xing Tianxia said in a low voice. What else can we do? Xianyuan Wushang looked at the night scenery outside the window. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, we don't have other thoughts. It's good to be a doctor. Xing Tianxia. What are you going to do? It's boring to be in a daze every day. Young master, I'm Violent Dragon. Xing Tianxia said in a low voice. Master doesn't like my name. But that's your name. Your surname is Xing, and your given name is Tian. A code name is a code name, but you can't change your name. And don't get me wrong. It's not that he doesn't like your name. He just thinks you don't deserve it now. Now, at such a long distance, he doesn't even know that you're called Jade Emperor, let alone Xing Tianxia. We're different. I won't stay here for long, but you don't know how long you'll stay. Do you want people to call you Violent Dragon all the time? Violent Dragon, it's so unpleasant. He touched his eyes, looked at the news that only he could see, and said lazily, I'll find a chance to go to that wool-free heights. It's so strange. I thought Li Tianlan was an exception, but this couple is unexpectedly terrible. I really see order in her. It's a miracle. I'm sure that Fatty has nothing to do with anyone in any of my previous books, let alone time travel or parallel universes. Fatty is Fatty. In fact, I'm just a fatty who thinks he's very young. Chapter 989. Because of the time difference, when the plane landed in Wulan State, it was just evening. It was the polar night in the eastern part of the European continent. The sky was gloomy, and it was night 24 hours a day. The sound of the staff on the plane lowering the gangway rang out. The cold wind whistled into the cabin. She, who had sunk her body into the leather sofa, slowly opened her eyes from meditation. Your Highness, we have arrived at our destination. The staff walked quickly to her side, bowed slightly, and whispered softly. She seemed to be in a trance. She gave a slow hum and turned her head to look at the scenery outside the small window of the cabin. It was cold outside the window. The sky was snowy, and it was pure white. Got it. She stood up a little slowly and walked to the cabin door a little unsteadily. There was a thick layer of snow in sight, and the pure whiteness extended to the end of the line of sight. Facing the cabin door, dozens of men in casual clothes with cold and calm auras stood quietly behind a lieutenant general in military uniform, like silent statues. The distant light swept across the sky, forming beams of light in the wind and snow. Everything in front of her seemed to be a large military base. The icy wind blew in her face. Because of the cold, her body looked more and more stiff. Standing in front of the cabin door, she looked at the crowd below silently and did not speak for a while. Everyone salute. A loud and clear voice cut through the snowy night sky. Led by the general at the front of the crowd, dozens of soldiers raised their hands to salute at the same time. Her expression gradually eased, and she walked down the spiral staircase little by little. Your Highness, welcome to the Arctic Ocean Corps Air Base. The lieutenant general put down his saluting palm, took 2 steps forward, and reached out to her. I'm Cheng Huining. Cheng Huining, the commander of the Arctic Ocean Corps of Zhongzhou State, the acting commander of the Snowdance Corps, and the highest military commander in the Arctic Ocean region of Zhongzhou State, was born in the Border Control Corps. A few years ago, he was the most valued general of Dongqing Wudi, and one of the core figures of the giant group. If there was no accident, after this year's election, there would inevitably be a gold star on his shoulder. If there was no suitable candidate at that time, his title of acting commander of the Snowdance Corps could basically be removed. Hello, she reached out very slowly, and both her expression and tone were a little stiff. Cheng, General. Your Highness, you. Cheng Huining frowned and looked a little worried. Nothing. My lockdown needs to be adjusted. She answered slowly, and her every move seemed extremely slow. An extremely subtle aura began to slowly awaken from her body. It wasn't very powerful, but it was extremely sharp and abundant. She took 2 steps forward, looked at the team behind Cheng Huining, and asked slowly, These are the elites I selected from the Arctic Ocean Legion. There are 20 Thundershocking Realm experts, and 2 of them are at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. The other 40 people are all close to the peak of the Fire-Flaming Realm. I plan to let them go to North Sea with your Highness. They should be able to do something. She stood there for a long time without saying anything. The subtle aura gradually became obvious, and the speed of recovery was getting faster and faster. She was now very slow in accepting information, always 1 beat slower than ordinary people, But her heart was very active. Her thinking was not hindered, but it was difficult for her to express herself. She forced a breakthrough and wanted to become the only expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world today. But she failed. Her internal injury was extremely serious, so she directly used sword energy to seal most of the skills in her body, which was similar to a self-seal. The powerful vitality close to the peak of the invincible realm was repairing her injuries all the time. Her aura was recovering little by little, and she adjusted her combat capability according to the situation and opponents she encountered. When her sword intent was released, it was also when she was at her peak. The organs that were constantly repaired by her own vitality wouldn't react in a short time when her power broke out. She could naturally maintain her peak state in a short time. This was equivalent to deceiving her body, and the price was that her physical injury was aggravated. No need. Stay, she said softly. Among the 80 warriors in front of her, 20 were in the thunder-shocking realm. Although there was only one at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, it was still a powerful force in any case. In addition, there were 60 in the fire-flaming realm. In total, the lowest average strength was already at the peak of the fire-flaming realm. The most important thing was that compared with their identities as experts, they were warriors. What did this mean? This meant that they had an unusual tacit understanding, discipline, and strong ability to execute on the battlefield. If a team of the same size in the dark world encountered such a team, it would probably be crushed in minutes. There were very few organized troops whose average strength was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm in the entire dark world. Even in the heyday of the Samsara Palace and the current Emperor Dong's palace, they couldn't produce such troops. And the most famous such troops were the Heaven Punishment Troop of the Wang family of Beihai. 300 warriors whose average strength was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm could even seriously injure an invincible realm expert when they cooperated perfectly. The 80 people in front of her were equivalent to more than a quarter of the troops of all heavens. It was impossible for the Arctic Ocean Corps to have such a family, so the 80 people in front of her could only be the experts that Cheng Huaining had tried every means to transfer from various departments of the army. It could even be said that they were the vast majority of the experts in the Arctic Ocean Corps. Each of them was a middle or high-level officer in the army. Of course, there was no problem with the tacit understanding of this group of people. The final battle in Beihai was a cruel battlefield that was destined to bury countless bones. Thunder-shocking realm experts and even invincible realm experts would die. Even if she had nothing to do with the Arctic Ocean Corps, she was reluctant to send these people to the battlefield. And now the power of Wulan State had been unprecedentedly weak. If these people were transferred away, the order of the entire Wulan State might be affected. Her voice was slow, but it was clear. There was a commotion in the crowd. They stay in Snow Country. It was Flaming Fire of the Samsara Palace, who was also the Queen of the Dark Knights, Wang Yuexianga, who spoke with some difficulty. Cheng Huaining froze for a moment and said softly, "Your Highness, don't worry. I have arranged enough forces in Snow Country." Wang Yuexianga still shook her head. Her aura gradually recovered, and her tone became clearer. "Stay. I in Tianlan, that's enough. There's no need. For Beihai." Cheng Huaining was silent for a while, then smiled helplessly and said, "I understand." "Knights. Knights." Wang Yuexianga looked at Cheng Huaining with a hint of inquiry. Cheng Huaining smiled and said softly, "Your Highness, don't worry. I can guarantee that the knights will be safer than ever." Wang Yuexianga looked back in the direction from which she came. The night sky was high and deep. It was snowing, and everything was quiet. She couldn't see the situation in the northern part of the European continent, but the sky splashed with blood and fire in the war had appeared in her mind. Wang Yuexianga turned around and said softly, "Let's go." The European continent was already on fire, but no one expected that the first place where the fire lit up was not the headquarters of the Dark Knights, which was empty after Wang Yuexianga left. Instead, it was the Holy Land that had always been recognized as inviolable by everyone in the European continent. The raging fire was accompanied by, when the huge explosion sounded, it was close to midnight in the Holy Land. The huge destructive force of the explosion directly broke down some of the old walls of the Holy Land. and the damaged buildings collapsed toward the interior of the Holy Land. In the deafening sound, dozens of soldiers of the Holy Disarmament Corps who guarded the wall were blown to pieces on the spot. The crazy roar of the engine sounded almost at the same time as the explosion. Under the night sky, several cars rushed into the Holy Land at full horsepower. The vehicles were running amok on the exquisite streets of the Holy Land, which could be said to be extremely small. Their goal was clear and direct, and they rushed straight to the Holy Palace in the center of the Holy Land. After a short period of astonishment, the Holy Disarmament Corps reacted immediately. The scarlet and dazzling signal flare, representing the enemy's attack, suddenly rose into the sky. The entire Holy Land was dyed with a layer of blood under the light of the signal flare. How dare you! In the furious roar, the masters of the Holy Land finally recovered from their stupor. At the moment the signal flare rose into the air, their rumbling voice resounded through the entire Holy Land like thunder. You are courting death. How many years had it been? How many years had it been since someone had been so presumptuous? Everyone in the Holy Land had never experienced or even imagined such a scene in their lives. Someone dared to directly attack the Holy Land? Were they crazy? In an instant, an incomparably violent thunderbolt lit up in the Holy Palace. The clear sound of thunder rolled across the sky, and countless dark blue electric arcs rose straight from the ground into the sky. Countless, dense electric arcs spread quickly between heaven and earth, and almost in an instant, they covered the entire nearby world. There was cold killing intent everywhere between heaven and earth. Endless electric arcs crisscrossed above the sky, and then fell wildly. Thunder rain. The dense electric arcs smashed down like a rainstorm, hitting every car. The sound of explosions kept ringing, and the motorcade that was madly sprinting toward the gate of the Holy Palace exploded one after another. The off-road vehicle at the front, which had obviously been specially modified, suddenly shook, and the huge body directly expanded in the process of crazy driving. A layer of extremely heavy armor appeared on the body, and a large amount of energy-absorbing materials were placed on the armor. The rainstorm like lightning almost directly overturned the entire motorcade, and the vehicles exploded one by one. In the fire, the masters who did not hide their aura accelerated and charged, while the vehicle at the front stared at the rainstorm like lightning and continued to accelerate. Accelerating, faster and faster. The thick exhaust pipe of the vehicle emitted thick smoke, and the seemingly extremely cumbersome vehicle was less than 200 meters away from the Holy Palace. In an instant, its speed more than doubled. Carbon monoxide accelerated. The huge body of the vehicle almost rose into the air under the extreme acceleration at the cost of destroying the vehicle itself. Facing the lightning that filled the sky, it directly crashed into the gate of the Holy Palace. A figure dashed out of the vehicle and stood in midair. Amidst the earth-shattering explosion, the vehicle that was filled with high explosives slammed into the gate of the Holy Palace. The vehicle disintegrated, and flames soared into the sky. In the distorted space, the sturdy building of the Holy Palace seemed to distort violently, and a huge crack tens of meters wide was blown out. At the last moment, a thin old man rushed out of the vehicle. He stood in midair, and a light blue light curtain appeared on the surface of his body. The rain of lightning in the sky continued to fall, but the moment it landed on his body, it was melted by the light curtain. Dressed in a tuxedo, trousers, clean and kind leather shoes, and neatly combed grayish-white hair, the meticulously dressed old man narrowed his eyes as he looked at the main gate of the Holy Palace that had been blown open. He smiled softly. As expected of the tortoise shell of the Holy Palace, it's really hard. The high explosives in the vehicle were a new product developed by the Knights of Darkness. Although there was not much in the vehicle, it was enough to successfully blow up an entire building if it were a normal building. However, it only blew up a gap tens of meters wide in the Holy Palace, and did not even cause any casualties. The defensive power of the buildings of the Holy Palace was indeed a little exaggerated. It's you. In the thunderstorm, a burly figure in light armor suddenly rose into the sky. Sin. You're courting death. Yes. The old man smiled faintly. Little fool, can you kill me? The burly figure in the armor suddenly tightened his body, and his killing intent was monstrous. He hated the name Little Fool, but damn it, the whole European continent seemed to know his name. And the culprit was the old man with the code name Sin in front of him. Little Fool was not Little Fool. In the Holy Disarmament Corps, he had no name, but he had a number. Number 2. The number 2 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps. If this position was placed in other forces, it would be equivalent to the top guest protector or elder with real power. His status in the whole European continent was extremely high. The people who could sit in this position were at least the top half-step invincible realm experts. In the most glorious period of the Holy Land, there were even examples of invincible realm experts serving as the number 2 adjudicator. The Sin in front of him was the chief butler of the Dark Knights. Before the Dark Queen joined the Dark Knights, his status could be said to be second only to the commander of the Dark Knights, Raphael. His codename was Sin, but he had a lot of nicknames in Europe, such as Adjudicator Hand, Dark Gospel, and Shadow Assassin. In the eyes of the Holy Land, the Dark Knights had always been an alien that they wanted to get rid of. In the eyes of the Holy Land, their high-level codenames always carried a strong sense of heresy, such as Sin, Pride, Desire, Fury, Sloth. If one wanted to trace back to the source, the original purpose of the Dark Knights was to fight against the Holy Land a long time ago. Therefore, they used whatever the Holy Land didn't like, always provoking the bottom line of the Holy Land. Therefore, in the vast Europe, compared with the Shadow Throne and Rothschild, who could more threaten the status of the Holy Land, the friction between the Holy Land and the Dark Knights was the most. Number 2 and Sin had dealt with each other more than once. The name Little Fool was a nickname given to him by Sin at random after he lost to him. Adjudicator Hand, Dark Gospel, Shadow Assassin. Sin had a lot of nicknames and he was awe-inspiring. And as the number 2 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps, he also had his own nickname, Little Fool. Number 2 gritted his teeth, and a cold voice squeezed out of his teeth word by word. Blasphemy against the Holy Land, you. Endless lightning swelled wildly on his body, one after another. The blue light shone wildly in the air, getting brighter and brighter. Damn it. Whoosh. A violent sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded. Number 2's body suddenly rose into the air, and he punched Sin's face hard. The lightning all over the sky condensed in an instant. Number 2's body rushed over a distance of tens of meters in the blink of an eye. All the lightning condensed on his body. The thunder rain suddenly disappeared. Number 2, whose whole body was covered with lightning, seemed to have become the only light source in the night. With a mocking face, Sin stood motionless in the air. Number 2, be careful. A roar suddenly sounded from the back of the Holy Palace. At the moment when the lightning condensed, the lightning all over the sky converged, and the world changed from bright to dark. Light and darkness intertwined. When everyone's eyes were a little dazed, a thin figure appeared in front of Number 2 like a ghost. There was only Sin in Number 2's eyes. In the past 10 years, in the constant friction between the Holy Land and the Dark Knights, he had fought with Sin 3 times, lost twice, and suffered a crushing defeat once. Number 2's resentment toward Sin had reached the point of overflowing. Sin could be said to be one of the strongest superiors of the half-step invincible realm in Europe. Although his state had declined as he grew older, he was still a European. The top of the half-step invincible realm. Under normal circumstances, Number 2 would still be no match for him. But this was the Holy Land. This was his home ground. He had accepted the Pope's coronation. In this state, his combat capability was enough to match the combat capability of the invincible realm. Number 2 was a little angry, but also a little excited. This might be his only chance to kill this old bastard. The lightning between heaven and earth converged into his body. Number 2's body suddenly shook. The space within 100 meters nearby suddenly twisted, and was about to form a pseudo-domain. An incomparably bright light burst out from Number 2. At this second, someone behind him warned, and the thin ghost-like figure appeared beside him at the moment when his pseudo-domain was about to take shape. The cold light flashed away. The world suddenly turned upside down. In an instant, Number 2 felt that the world was his body. His body flew in all directions, and it seemed that he was everywhere. Number 2 had never experienced this feeling. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for him to get the Pope's spiritual coronation. Was this the feeling of the combat capability of the invincible realm? He was in a trance, and his sight suddenly became dark. Number 2. A hoarse and furious roar could be faintly heard from behind. The light in the air that was about to rush in front of Sin instantly dimmed and disappeared. A large amount of blood mist splashed directly in front of Sin. The thin figure flashed away, and the extremely sharp cold light seemed to be poured into Number 2's body in an instant. Silently, Number 2's body was broken into countless pieces of flesh and blood in an instant. His torso, limbs, and head were completely decomposed and scattered in all directions. The thin figure disappeared. Sin stood quietly in the air. Number 2's body fell to the ground. There was a sudden dead silence in front of the Holy Palace. Sin narrowed his eyes and quietly looked at the Holy Palace in front of him. On the street behind him, the sound of vehicle wreckage constantly exploded. One figure after another was gathering together and sprinting toward the Holy Palace. The Holy Palace did not have any extreme reaction. Sin chuckled. Duke. A hoarse voice sounded from inside the Holy Palace. Another high-level officer of the Holy Disarmament Corps appeared in front of the Holy Palace. He looked at the thin figure beside Sin with solemn eyes. Duke smiled and seemed to be a little happy. After leaving the dark world for more than 2 years, it felt good that someone would remember his name. Samsara Palace. Duke. Europe's top assassin. Among the 12 supermasters of the Samsara Palace, if Flaming Fire was not included, Duke's ranking was second only to Saint and Military Counselor. In terms of combat capability, Duke, who was in the half-step invincible realm, was no worse than Military Counselor. When Saint and Military Counselor rarely took action, Duke in general represented the top combat capability of the Samsara Palace in foreign affairs most of the time. Chaotic footsteps sounded from inside the Holy Palace. Countless soldiers of the Holy Disarmament Corps were gathering and rushing to the gate of the Holy Palace. The high-level officer of the Holy Disarmament Corps who recognized Duke looked away from Duke and looked at the street ahead. The crowd was showing more and more obvious signs of decline in the night. The crowd was not large, about 100 people, but a considerable number of them were acquaintances. Even if most of them could not be named, they all looked very familiar. They were all high-level combat capability of the Dark Knights. In the past countless conflicts between the Sanctuary and the Knights, these people were old friends who had dealt with the Sanctuary more than once. His eyes fell on the front of the crowd. The tall and burly figure at the front of the crowd slowly moved forward. His face was expressionless, but a pair of eyes full of brutality and coldness, like those of a beast, were fixed on him. He stopped breathing and subconsciously took half a step back. Samsara Palace General. Another top expert in the half-step invincible realm. The Samsara Palace had been destroyed for more than 2 years. But at a very critical point in time that no one expected, the 2 supermasters, who had represented the top combat capability of the Samsara Palace most of the time, appeared in front of the Holy Palace with the Dark Knights. Duke, General and Sin. The 3 top experts in the half-step invincible realm. The 3 of them together were enough to entangle an ordinary invincible realm expert. And now the Sanctuary. He lowered his head, and his heart was full of bitterness. In the current Sanctuary and the current Holy Disarmament Corps, there was not even a top expert in the half-step invincible realm, let alone the invincible realm expert. The crowd of the Dark Knights was approaching the Holy Palace step by step. A large number of experts exerted their strength at the same time, and the entire street of the Sanctuary was shaking slightly. More and more people of the Holy Disarmament Corps gathered in front of the Holy Palace, but from beginning to end, no one took the initiative to attack. Sin watched this scene quietly. He laughed a little cruelly. It seems that the intelligence is right. His voice swept through the Holy Palace with the night wind. The famous Holy Land is really just a bunch of kittens and puppies now. Did all your elites really get sent to East Island? The intelligence of the Samsara Palace is never wrong. Duke muttered with some dissatisfaction. The high-level officials of the Holy Disarmament Corps at the front of the Holy Palace clenched their fists subconsciously. The Sanctuary had been in a state of extreme emptiness for more than 2 years. In the chaos of Snow Country, The sanctuary lost not only Arsis and Moraid, who took away the Knights Templar, but also thousands of the most elite and powerful holy disarmament warriors. In Mormons, thousands of people and the Arsis tribe trembled in despair under the dark shadow. The tribe was robbed and slaughtered, and the strength of the entire Holy Disarmament Corps declined seriously. In more than 2 years, although the Holy Disarmament Corps had recovered some of its strength, more than half of the experts were transferred by the Pope to Moraid. Among the experts who went to East Island, there was an Invincible Realm expert trained by the Holy Land 2 months ago, and the #1 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps. The Pope crowned the 2 of them, which could temporarily help the Invincible Realm experts stabilize their realm, and at the same time, give Adjudicator #1 the combat capability of the Invincible Realm. At the headquarters of the Sanctuary, the Pope crowned Adjudicator #2 again, giving him the combat capability of the Invincible Realm temporarily. The consecutive crowns made the Pope feel tired. The comprehensive strength of the Sanctuary was at its lowest tonight. Relying on Adjudicator #2, several Thundershocking Realm experts, and the power of the Judgment Corps, they could only defend the Sanctuary, and could not do anything to the outside world. Under such circumstances, they were ambushed by the Dark Knights. What was worse was that Adjudicator #2 was killed in a second under Duke's sneak attack. The strength of the entire Holy Disarmament Corps dropped again. On the chaotic night, Sin stood in the air and raised his palm with a smile. The experts of the Dark Knights on the street began to speed up. After tonight, his voice echoed slowly between heaven and earth. The entire sanctuary will become history. Knights. The dazzling lightning lit up on the old man, getting brighter and brighter. Charge. You're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.